One.
Senate Government Operations, Tuesday, March 9th, and we are back from our big town meeting break. Some of us had a relaxing time and some of us didn't, but we're all back here now. So the first thing we are going to do, which is not on the agenda because it just got referred to us today. As you remember, we had the bill around the juvenile records, initial arrest records. And it was not a committee bill, so it had to go and get a number and everything. And that number was given to it. And today on the floor, it was referred to us. It's S107. And so what I'd like to do is, if we're ready to vote that out, it is just as it was when we voted it out before with the 4 sponsors. But if we're ready to do that, I'd like to do that so that we can get it back on the floor. Anybody? Senator Collmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move that we vote out S107.
Thank you. So Senator Rahm, would you like to?
I will do that. And Gail, we can work on, she's sending me a blank one, but anyway, I don't have it yet, but I will take the roll and then record.
Okay. Does anybody have anything they want to say first before we vote it out? Okay. Let's do it.
Great. Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Collmore.
No.
Senator Polina.
Yeah. Excuse me, yes.
Myself, Senator Rahm, yes. Senator White.
Yes.
Okay, and that passes on 410.
Okay. And I would be happy to report this unless somebody wants to.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. I just thought we should get that done so that we can send it back up to the floor tomorrow. Okay. So now we have S25, which is some amendments to what was S54 last year, and I believe became Act 164, maybe. I'm not exactly sure. I think other people know better than I what the act was that it became. So the way I'd like to do this is to try to do it in a pretty orderly fashion. And we had 3 issues last time that I think we all agreed on. So I'd like to just make sure that we're all in agreement with those first and then get those out of the way and then move on to other ones. And I have kind of I've made myself a little list here so that hopefully we can go in an orderly fashion, if that makes sense to everybody. Okay. So the first change we made to S25 was on page 2, which is the part that would require opt-ins for the towns. And what this says is that if they haven't taken a vote by 2023, we moved it out a year because it's just too short a time frame for the municipalities. So if they haven't voted by 2023, then it'll revert for them back to being a town that allows retail. That's the way it was done with alcohol, and that's the suggestion here. And there's no language, and we should all have that amendment. And I think it's posted also. So did we agree on that?
I thought we did.
Yeah, I just want to make sure here that okay. All right. I'm checking that one off.
It really means the only reason the town would have to vote is if they want to say no.
Right. They'd have to opt out.
But
going after March 23, they'd have to opt out.
But a town might want to vote to opt in long before 2023. I mean, they might
Sure.
choose to do that just so that it's clear to anybody who would like to set up an establishment. So the second thing we did was for the Cannabis Control Board, we put in the section that would allow the removal by 2/3 of the advisory committee. In addition to the other two
Right.
members.
It's an or, isn't it?
Yes,
It's an and or,
it's an or, it's not an
or,
and.
right, okay,
There are two options for removal.
right.
Okay. Everybody okay with that? Okay. And then the third thing we did was change the timing for the advisory committee to have them seated by April 1st and have the first meeting called by the Secretary of Agriculture by the 15th. So that they can be advisory to the committee that they're supposed to be advisory to. They need to be seated first. Did Senator Collmore?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question. Today's March 9th. April 1st is about 3 weeks away.
I know.
Is that,
Realistic.
yeah, good. Thank you, Senator Bloom.
Probably not, but I think it gives the intent, it shows the intent that they should be seated before the
Okay.
CCB is,
Okay, thank you. And I'm for it.
and
Yep.
they could, if the governor is so interested, he could start and people could start appointing them even before this is passed. They
And
don't
we-
have to wait. Senator Clarkson?
We still have no word on the appointments to the CCB, do we?
No. Nope. Okay, but did everybody agree with that, the timing? Okay,
Yes.
good. Now we're done with that amendment. So this morning in judiciary, we talked about a lot of things, and Mark and Jeffrey and Virginia were all with us. And some things were, it's hard, this bill is hard because it kind of straddles so many committees and we weren't sure. So judiciary is sending the agriculture issues to the agriculture committee and asking them to weigh in on it because we felt there, and I feel the same way here kind of, is that we can't, it's hard for us to talk about the production cap for mixed lighting grows, or, I mean, that's an agricultural issue and that they should be weighing in on it. So Senator Collmore, you will be getting that. Senator Polina, are you still on there?
Oh, yeah,
Yes, I
Okay.
am. I go everywhere Brian goes.
exactly. We're together from sun up to sundown.
Oh,
Every day.
good. Okay. So you'll be getting some requests from judiciary. But then I'm going to just kind of give a list here of the things that I think we need to look at today. And I also have purposely not scheduled anything for Thursday and Friday so that we can continue any discussions we need to continue, but as much as possible, perhaps looking at as much as we can today. So
But
we
I'm
have
sorry,
said,
is this on a time frame around crossover?
if
Are
we
we
get
trying to
it,
get this done for
Yeah.
crossover?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I
Which is
thought.
Friday.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
I almost
And I
said
don't-
Passover.
I did that once and I'd have to check myself every single time.
But there are aspects, Anthony, of Passover and crossover that are quite similar.
Yeah, they're both painful.
The food isn't quite as good.
For which one?
Well, there's no food for crossover.
Okay, so
And there's,
here's just a list of the things that I think that we talked about this morning that we should be talking about here. One is Senator Rahm's amendment. One is taken from we had the draft for Representative China's bill that was introduced by him, and I think a lot of other people, or some people anyway. Now it is an actual bill. It's H414, but the draft is pretty similar. And one of the things that he had in there, or that they had in there, and I understand that a lot of this came from a lot of different groups, including the Social Equity Caucus, Vermont Racial Justice Alliance, the Vermont Growers Association. So it's kind of a group effort by a lot of people. So one of the things that is in there is the Cannabis Business Development Fund, and where the funding for that comes from, what the uses are, and who administers the fund. So that's one area that we'll be looking at. Then the other is some issues that Virginia Renfrew brought up that came from the dispensaries. There is a name for it, but I can't think of what they call themselves. And then the other one is looking at a license structure and how to word the license structure in language so that we're giving the Cannabis Control Board direction on how to set up the licensing structure, but not go into a lot of detail. And I think Graham had some what I thought was really good language at the end of the session this morning. So maybe he can talk about that. So those are kind of the issues that I see here. Does anybody have anything else to throw in right away? And we can talk about these in more general terms also, but I think these are the things that we are going to be looking at. So,
Jeanette, Graham is Graham Campbell from JFO or someone else?
No, Graham, I can't pronounce your last name.
His last name is difficult to pronounce.
But he's from rural Vermont.
Yeah. Okay.
And he just had some good language about directing the Cannabis Control Board to look at different things around the licensing structure without detailing what they were supposed to do. So
good.
We'll get to that. So does anybody have, Senator Polina?
Yeah, I feel weird asking this question, but I keep hearing about Senator Rahm's amendment, and I honestly don't know what it is. Is there a way?
And it's not, is it on our website? I can't.
I think it is, and she presented it to us.
But where is it?
I think it's on our website.
But Michelle asked if we wanted it in this flow of documents today, but I think we had previously just been looking at it from Judiciary's website from their documents.
So should we go to their website to see it? Is it?
Michelle, you're on mute. And Gail just posted it.
Okay. I was going to send it to Gail. Do you want me to? I can email it to y'all as well if you want me to.
Email it to us. That's the best.
Okay.
All right. So any other issues that you can think of right now that we should address?
Yeah, I think those are the key ones. So if I can make a suggestion, there's one issue here that I don't know that takes a lot of discussion. And it is Virginia Renfrew had suggested that we move the medical program under the CCB. And I just wondered if we can look at that, and because it seems to me pretty cut and dried and administrative. We either agree with it or we don't, but there isn't a lot of gray area. So Virginia, would you like to?
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and nice to see you all. So I'm Virginia Renfrew. I'm with the Vermont Cannabis Trade Association, which consists of the 5 medical cannabis dispensaries. And, listening to the discussions that have been going on and, the timeline kind of being thrown off. And one of our thoughts is to move the cannabis, move the medical program over under the Cannabis Board once it's established. And that will bring with it 3 staff people who could actually help the Cannabis Board with some of the things that they need to do. And the woman who runs the medical program, she's been with it since, I believe, 2008. So she definitely has a lot of knowledge. And one of the unfortunate things that we have seen is that the Department of Public Safety really is not that interested in this program. And so, you know, getting it over under the Cannabis Board, which we believe would have more interest in kind of more dedication to ensuring that medical patients, you know, can still have their program and have more support.
So committee, oh, and I just, I forgot to say that one of the things that's in the amendments that we already talked about was adding a member from the dispensaries, and there is an association name, but adding that member to the advisory committee. But now, so where are you committee? Do you have Senator Collmore?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Virginia, I'm just curious. You said that the Department of Public Safety has no interest. I don't know what that means exactly.
Well, I know that last year the Commissioner, Shirlene, testified in House Appropriations actually saying that he'd be fine if the program moved over to agriculture. And what we've just seen is that they're just not really putting any type of support into that program. It's there, and I believe that it needs to be under the Cannabis Board to have more support.
Okay, thank you.
It was originally, oh, Senator Polina?
I just want to talk a little bit more about that. When you say they're not with the program, what do you think they should be doing? I'm just curious. Like, what would you like to see public safety be doing? Or the Cannabis Review Board, any of them?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, a good example is when the pandemic hit and we reached out immediately to them and asked them, you know, to have the dispensaries be essential, because for patients, it is essential. It's no different than going to the pharmacy. And it fell on silent ears until we got legislators involved, who then reached out, and then we were able to get it to be listed as essential. It's those kind of things that we see, you know, whether it's, you know, allowing the person who runs the program to come into the State House and testify. That has not happened, and actually talk about what are the needs of the patients. You know, we have rules that were put in 2015 and they have not been updated. There's, you know.
I hear you. And they have there's 3 staff people?
There's 3 staff people.
I think originally it was when we were doing the dispensaries originally, it was a toss-up of whether they should go to the Department of Health or Department of Public Safety. And nobody really wanted them. But Department of Public Safety seemed to resonate with more legislators to get the bill passed in the first place because of the public safety issue.
Yeah, the Department of Health did not want it, and they actually opposed the legislation.
Mm-hmm. So where are we committee with that?
Makes sense to
Allison,
me.
Senator Clarkson?
It makes sense to me. It has never been a perfect fit. And I think that now that we have the Cannabis Control Board, it is a natural umbrella for it.
Senator Collmore?
I'm fine with it.
Senator Rahm?
Yep.
Senator Polina?
Yep.
Yep. All right. So I'm just going to cross that one off and we'll put that one in also, Michelle.
Can I ask a couple questions
Sure.
about that? So, so right now under Act 164, the program is and the positions are supposed to transfer over on March 1st of 2022. And so this will be doing it, you know, several months earlier. But because the board won't, and what happens when the program transfers under the current act is then the new medical and dispensary statutes that were enacted last year will take effect, and as well as whatever rules the board is adopting for the medical program and the dispensaries. And so if you're moving the program over earlier, it's going to have to continue to operate under the existing Department of Public Safety statutes and the existing Department of Public Safety rules when it goes to the board, because the other stuff won't be in effect yet and the board won't have any new rules pursuant to those new statutes. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody's clear on that. And because I typically don't work on that kind of stuff, I'll have to check in with probably like Ameren or O'Grady or somebody to kind of just check around the logistics of that all happening. But I just wanted to let you know, those are some things to kind of figure out, is around the logistics of how they'll operate under the old system, but under a new entity before the new stuff drops down.
Can't it be phased in as the ability of the CCD board is able to deal with it? I mean, can it?
Well,
Go ahead, Michelle.
I was just going to say, so a lot of the statutes that are in for the medical and dispensaries right now, a lot of them have been there since the very beginning when it was adopted, and a lot of them, they don't really make sense when compared to what an adult use market and the new adult use market that y'all have adopted in 164. And so the new statutes are to have more parity. So you don't have like patients having to jump through a bunch of hoops to get cannabis that patient wouldn't have to jump through if they just went to a retail store. And so you kind of need the new stuff to kind of come in. But the board can only adopt rules as fast as they can adopt rules according to the APA. And so I'm not sure, I think when we were working on this, last year, the year before, all stuff, we tried to figure out how to move it over earlier, but it was just a little too complicated. So,
Senator Collimore.
Actually, I think Senator Polina had his hand up first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that we just did something like this in the Agriculture Committee. We moved the program from Agency of Natural Resources to the Agency of Agriculture, but until the agriculture writes the rules for it, they'll still be operating under the A&R rules, although it'll be being done under the Agency of Agriculture. So you might ask Michael Grady about that. I mean, it's exactly what we did. We said, We're moving this over, but until the rules are there, you're still going to go by the old rules, but under the new agency.
right.
I think it
Senator
also might,
Collimore?
yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think it might be prudent also to ask Virginia whether she sees this as a obstacle, or whether, since obviously you're used to the rules, if they've been in effect since 2015, it wouldn't present any new issues for you.
I mean, I don't think so. I mean, I certainly would, look to Michelle and to Michael Grady on, how that would work. But yeah, I mean, the medical law has changed since 2015. So some of those rules are already out of date because we have new statutes. So I think that we can work within that, as we have been doing. And I'd also like to just add that it's important to remember that the medical program is all self-sufficient. It does not take any taxpayer money. It's run by the fees from the dispensaries and from the patients and from the caregivers and employees too. So, so that's good to know.
Thank you.
Any more issues with that? Okay. All right. So, yes.
Senator White, when I spoke too soon when I thought that your 4 pieces were all that we needed to be additionally addressing. We also have this memo from Monica Hutt, which we may or may not want to, which may or may not have anything for us to consider. And because she addressed it to both of you, both you
Yeah.
and Dick.
And we do have, I forwarded that to everybody.
Right,
And,
thank you.
And we know I will, just to be clear here, I will ask Monica if you want to weigh in. I know that you disagree with our decision about the removal of the board members. So Monica, if you would like to just weigh in on that, just so that we make sure we hear from you. I don't know what your title is, if we call you director or commissioner or chief.
Chief Prevention Officer.
I know.
Good afternoon, or just Monica is absolutely fine. Good afternoon, everybody. This is, I think, my third week or my fourth week in this brand new role. So thanks for asking me to come today, and I'm interested just to listen and hear all your thinking. I did send that memo. I collected some information from the administration, and I think that the specific issue, Senator White, that you wanted me to speak to was the accountability of the board. And certainly from an administration perspective, there is some concern that board members can only be removed for just cause by other board members, even though they are exempt state employees. And so it doesn't give the governor or create any accountability for that board, I think, from the governor's perspective. And that was one of the concerns that we were wanting to raise for the committee to consider.
Right. I think that I know that the administration feels there's some constitutional issues here, but our Ledge Council has assured us that there is not. And in reading the Constitution, it does say that I've got it right here, and also to appoint officers except where provision is or shall be otherwise made by law. So the appointment and removal of officers is subject to the law as well. So, I know that there's disagreement about that, and we did add the another avenue, just because, as Senator Collmore pointed out the other day, what if you had a disagreement between the two people, right, and you couldn't do anything, couldn't move. So we did add the advisory board, and a number of those members are appointed by the governor. So, Senator Collmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so I'd like to ask Monica whether, since the governor allowed this to become law without, if I'm remembering correctly, without his signature, why was that concern not voiced at that time? Because as the chair just mentioned, all we've done is provide an alternative vehicle for removal. The original bill did not involve the gubernatorial right to remove either, I don't think.
He objected then too.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was going to say, I believe in a letter that he issued, he did raise this as an issue,
Okay.
Senator.
All right, thank you.
And in fact, I think Jay Johnson testified to the committees that it was unconstitutional also. But we also know that the Green Mountain Care Board, this is how they function. So, all right. So can we move on then to our next set of issues? So I am a little torn here, so I want some advice from the committee. Senator Rahm has an amendment, and it why don't you tell us what it does? And then what I'd like to do then is talk about the Cannabis Business Development Fund.
For the record, Senator Keisha Rahm. So this has not even received a bill number. So I just want to say that it was the beginning of an idea that I ran by Senator Sears, and he asked me to come present it in committee. And I would be very open to changes to any of the details involved. But it was essentially building off of the idea that the war on drugs, and particularly the overcriminalization of Black and brown people in terms of trafficking or buying and selling of cannabis and marijuana has had a deep impact on communities that experience higher levels of policing. There are conversations happening around the state about how to reimagine public safety in a way that's cognizant of how much we increased law enforcement and law enforcement activity around drugs. And that included high levels of incarceration at one time for marijuana possession, maybe not as high levels in Vermont, but that has been a national trend. So this would take a percentage of the marijuana cannabis revenues up to a cap. And I know that some of those numbers are changing right now, so very open to changes there, to distribute in small grants through a number of racial justice and social justice organizations in the state, helping to guide the process, to offer small grants to our municipalities who want to have discussions about what public safety is going to look like. I know there was a sticking point about it being prioritized for municipalities that are having conversations about how to reduce the size of their law enforcement. I would certainly still personally argue that we have seen an increase in the number of law enforcement officers out there post-war on drugs, post-criminalization of cannabis. But at the same time, if that language is a sticking point for folks, I think that isn't part and parcel to the overall trend that I'm seeing around the state, which is a lot of communities want to bring law enforcement and community leaders to the table and have a conversation about how to build trust and restore a shared sense of and vision around public safety. And they are very depleted of funds to be able to have those conversations in a meaningful way. So absent that, there's a lot of strife and a lot of conflict. And this looked like a vehicle to have that conversation. I also understand that it may not be people may not see the nexus as clearly as I do, which I appreciate. And I would be happy to have this conversation related to the general fund or other funds. I do believe it's really timely. And I take Senator Polina's point from the week before crossover that this money would not materialize for some time. And these conversations are pretty ripe and happening right now. And that all said, I just want to also say that this in no way is me contradicting or trying to remove support from the other provision that we're talking about, which I believe has a very strong nexus around people who've had their lives disrupted by the war on drugs and are now, have had family members that may have happened to, but either way are trying to participate in the legal market and deserve some reparative access to that.
So I will tell you I am not opposed to having a fund to be used for this purpose. But I am opposed to earmarking revenue from this source a compromise was reached last year to put 30% of it into prevention and education. That was a compromise reached between the House and the Senate. And my feeling is that the revenues should go to the general fund, and the general fund then should figure out where they're most needed. And I will tell you that I've had at least 5 different advocacy groups, I mean, not advocacy groups, but issue-oriented higher education, K through 12, that want to earmark the funds from this revenue source. So I am not opposed to the fund itself. but I am opposed to earmarking money from this revenue source. So I just throw that out. So other people? Committee members? Senator Collmore?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree. I think this is one of those situations where we still don't have, in my mind at least, a firm estimate of what number we're talking about to begin with. And it seems like a little duck keeps coming and taking a piece of it away every time we turn around and look, and that if we're not careful, there won't be any money left. So I agree with the chair. I think there are other ways for Senator Rahm's idea to come to fruition, but it's probably not a good idea to do it this way.
I will backtrack here just a little bit and say that I do believe that municipalities should share in the 14%.
Yeah.
By a split there, but yes, Senator Clarkson.
Yes, you have a bill in finance, which definitely supports the notion that municipalities should share in the revenue. I actually think to get immediate results, Keisha, that a good partnership on this work, because I think this work needs to be done. But I think that we don't need to go to this sort of statutory effort to get it done. We have now a very robust restorative justice center at the law school. I think actually this is a great opportunity for Bobby Sand to partner with municipalities in the league and offer restorative justice consulting with communities that would like to engage in this work. And I think we could work on something that was, that could be done right away, and without waiting for revenue and without earmarking anything and without going through that battle. And also, so much of what people are wanting now is the cart before the horse. I mean, we just got to get this board up and running first. But this, if we partnered with the Restorative Justice Center, working with the LCT, we could get these opportunities out the door like right away and create a real dialogue as they open these markets in towns. Anyway, it just struck me that could actually happen faster and maybe more productively.
Yeah, I would, in response, I would just say, absolutely. I'm talking to Bobby Sand and, totally hear that. I think what happens when, and even in response to this notion of, some revenue sharing for communities, the communities that just tend to have a little bit more revenue on hand can put money toward these conversations. And the ones that may have this issue, but their community doesn't prioritize it for an investment, you may need a community group to be saying, please, help us get this money so that we can do the work in our community without waiting for the town to prioritize it.
Right.
So, just sort of figuring out a way to even out the access to this kind of conversation. It, certainly feels, even in Chittenden County, very uneven from conversations. And I can say the same about the rest of the state from anecdotally, but, I would be really open to other forms of getting this out there. I just think there needs to be a little bit of money from the state that says, and even if the prioritization is instead to a certain size of community, I just think they're really depleted of funds to make this a priority in places where it really should be a priority.
This might be, I don't know if this would be doable at all, but we are getting some one-time money. And we might be able to somehow tie these conversations to the kind of closure that we've had because of the pandemic and just increasing those conversations. So it might be that would be a faster and more reliable source. I don't know, but we could talk to Jane Kitchell about that.
That sounds good. And I don't want to complicate things too much, but my final point would be, I do see just an overall need for communities want to build equity plans. They want to protect candidates who are running, who come from diverse backgrounds. They want to have conversations to repair harm when someone in a public role puts out something that may appear, you know, or be experienced as racist to others in the community. There's a lot of, you know, discord between police and community members. Towns are having these conversations and they're just not doing it on equal footing because they don't have the same resources. So I would really love to continue to explore how we help communities have these conversations without it being uneven.
Well,
So maybe we have the conversation aside from this bill and have the conversation and make a recommendation to appropriations.
I'm ready to go down that route and
Okay.
let us do the cannabis bill separately.
And
Yeah.
have Bobby come in and Senator Polina.
Yeah, I'm torn. I think it's a good idea. I think the conversation needs to happen. I agree that everybody wants some of this money, and that makes it hard to say yes to one and say no to all the others. I'm just wondering off the top of my head whether this would, when you talk about encouraging the conversations through one-time appropriations, and I know they're already overworked, but what about the social equity office or whatever it's called? You know,
Yeah.
whether they would be able to take it on if they were given funding to do it. I don't mean just make them take it on, but just seems like a logical place to maybe have it operate out of.
I can say without speaking for Susanna, we have been in the same conversations with municipalities asking for thought partnership around this work. And she has some ideas. And it may be when we talk to her about candidates who are experiencing greater harassment and threats, we could also ask her about what she has in mind and how we might be able to support her in that. I actually think that's a great idea without overburdening her with anything new.
Sure. Well, I'm assuming we're going to give her more money this year, but we'll see.
So
Jeanette,
yes.
sorry, I just wanted to add, we also don't need to reinvent the wheel here or funding, because there is funding in our justice centers. I mean, we also have established places, you know, in addition to the restorative justice work at the law school to reach out to. We have Susanna, and we have justice centers that could also help this dialogue and facilitate it. So, there
I'm
is
going to
funding
move us-
and there are organizations.
I'm going to move us away from this conversation because we're going to have this conversation in a different context. But we
Yeah.
have to do something about S25 or we won't
Right.
do it. So I'm going to
it all the
stop
time.
this conversation now, if that's okay with everybody.
Sure.
And we will continue it, but in a different approach, knowing that the need is there and that we support the need but not the funding source. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So then what I would ask us to do is look at, and this is from the H414, and it is found, I think it's posted, but it is H414. It's on the website, the House website. And it comes from, it is found on page, no, I can't. I've had the page in the,
It's section 2, and it starts on page 3 with the definitions.
yeah, but there was a very specific, Cannabis Business Development Fund.
Right, I just mentioned that with the definitions is because in order to read the section 986 on definitions, 987, which is the Business Development Fund, and then 988, which is the loans and grants from that fund, all go together. So I would say it's those 3 statutory sections, and I just excerpted them and put them on a blank sheet of paper. Would it be helpful for me to send that to you guys instead of you
Yeah.
having to sort through the bill?
Yes,
Yeah,
Okay.
and
that would be great.
for some reason, I had page 6 pulled out of my bill, so I'm sitting here looking from page 5 to 7 and can't find page 6.
Michelle,
And then
if you would email that to us, that would be great.
I'm sending it right now to you and to Gail as well.
So can I just ask the people who are with us today, Jeffrey, Mark, Graham, if you have any comments on what we've talked about so far, not getting into the, and I really don't want to get any more into the issue of the community grants, because we're going to talk about that in a different venue. So I know that's an important issue, but I just want to make sure that we do it in a more thoughtful way further on. So do any of you have any comments about what we've talked about so far?
Mark Hughes, Racial Justice Alliance, Executive Director, for the record. Good afternoon.
Hello,
committee.
Mark.
How's everyone?
Good.
Awesome. I appreciate being invited to the committee again. Senator White and I are spending long days together. So I'm glad to be here again. I wanted to just also lift up the premise of the Senator Rahm's proposed bill and the essence of the some of the language that you will find in H414. For clarity, this is a Racial Justice Alliance bill carried by Representative Brian Chena. And I think instead of going into detail, just because of how the chair has positioned this, I think it would probably be best just to say that there is work that must occur in our communities. There is work that is occurring in our communities, and the revenue stream from something such as, and I'll use the term deliberately, marijuana, is not only symbolic, but is emblematic to the damage that it's caused and continues to cause across the United States as well as Vermont. And at the same time, there are other ways to repair this damage. So I just wanted to just lift up what the senator position, acknowledge the fact that there are other ways, express disappointment that these, I guess the term that was used is nexus, this nexus is not as readily apparent to other members of the committee, but also offer willingness to have that conversation and more in moving forward. Because this is not just about marijuana, this is about the damage that systemic racism causes to Black and brown folks, has caused and continues to cause. This was one vehicle. It just happens to be right now that we're having a conversation about an emerging market, and we find no favor in any market. So this market is not an exception, and this system is not an anomaly. It's producing the same impact that it has historically on Black and brown folks. So I would be remiss if I didn't at least offer that in sitting amongst the committee. This is important work. The work that is currently happening in Burlington has never been about just defunding the police. It has always been a combined effort that went towards restructuring, and you will see a bill that's emerging from us on restructuring public safety, so everyone is safe, so everyone feels safe, as well as the whole economic piece, the equal opportunity, the economic and cultural empowerment, and the racial equity, inclusion, belonging. It's a package. And so I just, again, appreciate the time. I'm looking forward to also having the opportunity to speak to where the Section 989
Yep, we'll get
Community and
there.
Social Equity Program Yep.
We'll
I
get
just
there.
got an F-35 that went over, so maybe
Yeah.
you missed part of what I just said. But in addition to that, there is another part of this policy that's in front of you that speaks directly to this issue that you're talking about. So when we return to it, I would love to have the opportunity to share that with you as well, because it speaks to how we do this work in the communities, in the revenue streams that could be produced to do that work. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. So Jeffrey or Graham, do you have any comment about, and I will tell you that this morning, Graham was making some comments, and his, I don't know, maybe 6-month-old daughter was objecting strenuously in the background to what he was saying. He said she was in support of it, but we think that she was actually objecting. So Graham or Jeffrey, do you want to comment on what we've done so far? And I don't want to get any more into the conversation about the community work, because we're going to have that later. So would either of you like to comment on what we've done so far? Which is only about 5 things.
Hi, folks. This is Graham Unings, Rufanacht, Policy Director at Rural Vermont, for the record. This is Juniper, who Chair White was speaking about. She's sleeping on my chest now. She's 11 months old.
Oh.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak similarly to Mark. I understand how you're framing this, Chair White. And just speak, as Rural Vermont's been a small agricultural organization in the state since 1985. I'm sure Senator Polina can speak to this, as he was one of the founders of the organization. And, as we got involved in this work with what was S54, the relationship to the history of the criminalization of this plant, but also the criminalization of communities, people who were associated with it, and how racism, anti-immigrant sentiment, et cetera, was also deeply associated with this plant and with the law enforcement response, has been critical to our understanding of how we need to approach this going forward. So I'm glad to hear that you're going to be working on this going forward, even if you're not supportive at this point of how Senator Rahm's amendment seeks to find funding. I understand sort of the challenge you're speaking about when it comes to the compromise made historically with the House in relationship to how that funding would be spent. And similarly to what Mark said, we certainly support this conversation going forward about how policing and law enforcement can be restructured in our communities, but also just the understanding of the fundamental relationship of cannabis prohibition and criminalization to a significant amount of violence and harm done in people's and communities' lives. So just seeking to voice our support for the sort of core issue here and the relationship of this industry to needing to be able to afford through this industry some of those repairs holistically, not simply for those who want to be involved in the industry. But I'll leave it there for now and appreciate it, and I'll listen and speak more to those more ag-based stuff going forward.
Thank you, Graham. Jeffrey, did you want to say something?
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair and Senators. Great to see you again. For the record, Jeffrey Pizzatello, Executive Director, co-founder of Vermont Growers Association, representing the mom and pops, the farms, the small businesses in the emerging legal marketplace. There's not much more to add to actually what Graham and Mark had brought up, so I'll take a slightly different angle just to share some of what other states have gone through, some trials and tribulations with.
Can I just back up here a little bit? I want us to move forward, but we have a whole list of other things to address here. So what I was asking was if you had any comments about what we've already done. And I hate to cut you off, but what we've already done is done the opt-in for the towns, removal for the CCB, the advisory committee timing, and moving the medical program to the CCB. That's what we've done so far.
Okay.
And we've talked about going forward with Senator Rahm's proposal, but in a different venue. So I really don't want to talk about that now, because we won't get to the other issues that we have to do. Our conversation for that will be, we'll devote a whole day to it, but not today. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no problem. And thank you for clarifying. I wanted to speak to Massachusetts issues with their social equity program and its rollout, but that's fine. So with regards to my second point that I did want to bring up was addressing the medical marijuana industry. And so I just briefly wanted to, I think it's opportune to share the concerns of our constituents. A lot of them are in the medical marijuana marketplace. So these are patients and caregivers. And a lot of their concerns, and I want to be mindful here, not to impugn, the dispensaries in our state, but there's a reason why Vermont has one of the least successful medical marijuana programs in the entire country. And a lot of that has to do with access to the market. Most of our patients and caregivers get their medicine from their own gardens that they grow themselves and not from our dispensaries. So as we move forward in looking to administer the medical marijuana program moving forward, I would just be mindful of that, where we're coming from, and be mindful to seek improvements moving forward, and maybe have public forums and ask the medical marijuana community to speak to some of the troubles and issues that they themselves have experienced as it either gets rolled into the CCB or whatever you guys choose. I wanted to put that on the record. There are issues that I think are worth exploring as you guys move forward with the CCB. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to include those, and I'll save my comments on social equity for a later time.
Thank you. Thank you. But there is, okay, so what I would suggest now is that we look at what Michelle, I think, just put up. I don't have it. I only have one screen here. But it is.
She emailed it to all of us.
I know, but I only have one computer. I can't do email and this at the same time because I only have one thing. But what I would like to do is look at the Cannabis Business Development Fund.
Right.
We talked a little bit about that the other day. It's on page 6 of the bill. If you're looking at the bill, I don't know where it is that this, Michelle, where is it? Do people have it? Do you know where?
Yeah, I sent it. Gail should have gotten that email as well. So I don't know if you want her to share it on the screen or maybe it's posted. But so if people just want to look at H414, following along at home, it's in section 2 and it's 7 VSA sections 986 through 988.
Yeah.
All I did was here if you would like me to share that.
I don't like here's my preference. I don't like them shared on the screen because then I can't see anybody. And so if everybody has access to looking at it, and people at home will just have to follow along if they can and follow the conversation.
It is posted in the documents area on our website. So that's where people who are following along can find it.
Yep. Thank you.
So it substantively begins in 987 because 986 is just the definitions, right?
Yes, and they go together, but I'm going to start with 987. And what we were asked by judiciary to look at this. And I believe that this is when we were talking before about when Senator Rahm first brought her amendment to us, and we talked about it before. One of the comments that came up was that we should focus on the individuals, or one of the things that we should do is focus on the individuals who are trying to enter this market, who may have difficulty entering the market for one reason or another, particularly since they've been, it might be, and we talked in judiciary this morning about using the word race. Yes, let's use the word race because there is a racial issue here. So let's do that. And there's also a socioeconomic issue for those poor rural kids from Vermont who might have been impacted. So what he set up here is a cannabis business development fund And I would like us to just talk a little bit about that and see if we want to put that into S25. And if you look at it, it's funded by fees from the integrated licenses. And I believe that Virginia has testified, she wrote to us that they would agree that 3% of the sales up to $50,000 for the first 6 months from the integrated licenses should go into this fund. So there is potentially $250,000 into the fund because there's 5 integrated licenses. And then $200,000 from the registration fee fund has been suggested. And then he suggested 10% of the revenue. I would suggest that we ask for an upfront allocation to put into that fund to get it going, because we're going to need, if we're really going to provide technical assistance and loans and grants to people to start their businesses, we can't wait until the businesses have already been started and there's money generated. That's a little behind. I mean, it's like putting the horse before the cart, right? We need to put the cart in front, which is to get some money available to people who need to have the loans or grants or the technical assistance. So that's my suggestion. So can we talk about that a little bit? Anybody? No?
The committee or
Yeah. Well, because I first want to hear from committee and then we'll hear from others.
Well, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
No,
go ahead.
I like the idea. It's just hard to predict the amount of money that's going to come in and go out. It's the same kind of thing, but I'm certainly support the idea. Jeanette, when you said you want some upfront money, what do you think in a ballpark? What are you thinking it might take?
I have no idea, because if you look at what he has here for uses, and I think this makes perfect sense, is loans and grants to social equity applicants, costs related to administering it, outreach to get to those people, and job training and technical assistance. And he also has some research in here, but I think it could all be used up by research. So I think my feeling is that the direct money to the applicants makes sense, or the technical assistance. I have no idea what we're talking about needing here. And I would say $300,000 or $500,000.
Right.
I don't know.
Because you do need to do it first, because otherwise other people will start the businesses, and by the time you generate the revenue to provide business support to the people that we're trying to work with, it's gonna be too late, because the businesses will already be up and running and they'll already be shut out.
Right.
So,
Senator Collmore?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm trying to get this is the first time I've seen this bill, so
yeah,
I'm trying to understand it. I think there's probably a difference between one-time money and sustaining money that's got to be found every single year. We will obviously be, from what the governor's told us, getting $1.2 billion at some point. But I think we do need to be careful not to use one-time money to begin a program that then will need to be funded every single year, and there won't be any more one-time money. So if you're suggesting $300,000 of one-time money, I think I could support that. But if I'm reading this bill correctly, it says $2 million per fiscal year, or 10% of the revenues, not to exceed that number. And again, that goes back to what we had said earlier with Senator Rahm's amendment. I think that's coming out of the fund that, again, we have no idea how much that's going to generate.
Yeah, I didn't add that to my source of revenue, because I think that's after the fact. As Anthony said, you need to have the money up front. And I think you could set it up as a revolving loan fund.
Yeah.
So that
Okay.
if somebody got a $50,000 loan and then they had a successful business, they could start paying back into that. And we do that in housing a lot,
Yep.
in rehab work, and it works well. So Senator Clarkson?
So this strikes me as a lot of work for the cannabis. Well, first of all, did Brian, do we have
No,
a fiscal?
This doesn't have anything,
No, wait,
to
can I
do
just
with
ask my question, which is, do we have a fiscal note on this? Because whoever would have done the fiscal note could actually give us some numbers that would make sense, so we're not shooting in the dark. Either that, or it would be great to have ACCD or a business development group weigh in to sort of get a notion of what are real costs and what would be good, solid projections. The technical assistance could be provided by a host of people. I mean, this to me would just hijack the Cannabis Control Board. There are other groups that are qualified to provide technical assistance to new business people. And this would be a great partnership with our community action agencies who have micro businesses who already have technical expertise. We don't need to reinvent the wheel here.
no, this isn't the Cannabis Control Board that is doing this.
It says to compensate the Cannabis Control Board for any costs related to the provisions of low interest loans and grants to qualified social equity applicants. It has the Cannabis Control Board overseeing a lot of this. And it strikes me that,
Well,
this will just totally, this is a very specific function. It's a business development function. And we have plenty of groups in this state that do that well. And this might be a perfect partnership with our community action agencies or with ACCD, we could figure out, or with ag. So
if you look at page 7, it does say that ACCD is going to administer the loans and grants.
oh, okay. Sorry, I see. Yeah, further down. Right.
So I don't know why you would have to compensate the
Yeah,
Cannabis Control Board. because-
Sorry. Yeah, I don't either. I would let, quite honestly, given how tenuous this whole scene is at the moment, I would agree to the purpose and let the mechanics be worked out as it all evolves. And let ACCD come back to us with a proposal of how to organize it.
So
I
I
mean-
guess the first question is, are we in agreement that there should be a cannabis business development fund set up? I guess that's the first question. And this is for individuals. This isn't communities. This is for individuals who, and then you're going to have to identify who those individuals are. But
And you can't discriminate by race. I mean,
Yes,
no, you can't. Not legally. We're not allowed to.
You can
You
say
have to come
coming
up with
from
pro-
historically
you have-
marginalized groups.
you can have priorities and you can
You
do
can-
it.
It's hard. You have to have a proxy criteria that is fair for anyone. I'm sorry. I mean, I think this is a problem we face when I am in the development of this asset gap bill I'm working on. It is, legally, we are not allowed to discriminate by protected. We have protected classes. We're not allowed to discriminate. And so that is, we can come up with proxy criteria for things, but that is one of our challenges here.
Well, first of all, let's go back. Do we agree that there should be some kind of a fund available to people who want to start a business in this emerging market that don't have access to funds, whether it's because they've been discriminated against, because they've been incarcerated, because they come from neighborhoods where there's more arrests than in other neighborhoods, whatever the criteria is. Do we agree that we should have a fund? I guess that's the first question. And
Yeah.
I'm not even sure how this all plays out, because H414 is in the House.
Right.
But
And it could be added in the House too.
No, H414 is in the House right now.
Has
And
it
we're
been taken up?
I don't know. I'm not, I don't know. And I don't even know what committee it went to. So.
Bill was
but
introduced this morning.
Do you know what committee it went to? Mark?
I can check for you.
Okay, great.
It
thanks.
probably went to Commerce.
I don't know, but
I would imagine it went to GovOps, but I'll find out.
that's my
Yeah,
guess.
GovOps or Commerce.
So my first question is, can we agree that we should have a fund for people who need loans or grants?
I would vote yes.
Yes.
I would say as long as it's equitable for everybody.
Well, we have to figure out who it is, and I will give you some examples that were brought up this morning that around the definitions of who it is. And do we agree that we should probably put some upfront money in there instead of waiting for the money to come from a revenue source that's already generating money that these people can't get into because they're behind the 8 ball?
Yes, and not to
Yes.
interrupt if you just want to hear from the committee, but I think that's what Jeffrey was talking about with the Massachusetts experience, that about 1% of the applicants in the first round would have qualified under this because none of them could start a business without some additional help at the beginning, some access to capital. So I
So we
think
need to have
other states
upfront.
learned this the hard way. Yeah.
We could ask ACCD what they would
Yeah.
recommend putting in for some kind of a,
Yeah, I think it
Okay.
would be great to let ACCD work to develop this and set a time when it needs to come back. But and I think your idea of doing it as a revolving loan fund is a great idea, because that just keeps feeding money back into the community, and it hopefully makes it sustainable. But it has, I think the purpose of this is to go to people who come from communities that have been disproportionately affected by the prohibition of cannabis.
okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask ACCD if they could give us a sense of how much upfront money would be needed to go into funding this, if they have any sense at all of what that might be. And maybe, I think there are some, they might get some help from the Women's Commission, the Commission on Women, in terms of what the kinds of outreach that they were able to do. And does that make sense?
I think you'd be a better partner with the community action agencies who already do micro business setup. They already work with this population. I think they already are doing this kind of work and providing technical expertise to this community. I think they're they would be great partners, and they have partnered with ACCD on a bunch of COVID stuff. So, I mean, and they run the micro business program. I mean, this is in many ways a piece of the micro business program.
So are you suggesting that we not involve ACCD?
I think it's a conversation we should have with the agent, with those two groups, ACCD and the community action agencies. But Michelle was trying to say something. I apologize.
Sorry, Michelle.
I just wanted to add, and I can forward the language to you, but I just wanted to let y'all know that in Act 164, and I'm just going to read from the bill if you don't mind, just so that I don't miss anything. Already, it's law that ACCD, in collaboration with the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, is required to provide business and technical assistance to Vermont applicants with priority for services based on criteria adopted by the board in accordance with the act. And okay. In those priorities are applicants who are women applicants and BIPOC community applicants. So that's already in current law that ACCD is supposed to be doing that. And then there's another provision that says that no later than September 1st of this year, the board is to begin working with Department of Labor, ACCD, Department of Corrections, and the Director of Racial Equity to develop outreach training and employment programs focused on providing economic opportunities to individuals who have historically been disproportionately impacted by cannabis prohibition. So I just want to let you know that there is something that was passed last year that's there. So
what we need to do is just set up the fund and give it some money. Because the rest is already there, right?
Right. And I would check with ACCD about and with AG maybe about what an appropriate amount would need to seed it.
Yeah, that's what I had suggested.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
And Madam Chair, it was House GovOps that it was.
It was. Okay. Okay. So I have no idea how these are going to fit together or where we're going or what. It is a big mystery to me because they're taking up one of these and I don't know what they'll come up with. And if we end up with two different things, I don't know how we do that, but I will recommend to Judiciary that we set up this Cannabis Business Development Fund and that we pre-fund it. Senator Rahm?
I don't know if this makes the timing even more complicated, but this sounds like a really good question on the details for the advisory board as well. I feel like this is exactly the kind of group thinking from different people's lived experiences that we need to understand what would actually work. And I just don't know how that jives with like the April piece of getting them together.
Well, my guess is that nobody will be coming back to us with anything before May. Because, I mean, we don't even have the members of the board yet. So, and I don't know when we'll have them.
Well, it may at some point at least be useful for us to also look at the way the Massachusetts Equity Fund shifted after their lessons learned and how they structured their program after realizing it fell flat the first time.
You know what? I think that's a great idea because we don't need to reinvent the wheel. If Massachusetts has done this and done it successfully and they shifted gears and did some redesign, it would be great to hear from them.
Okay, so I'm not sure where we go now because I have some thoughts about some of the things in H14, 414, but I don't know that it's even worth addressing them because if we put something into S25 and they do something different in H14 or 414, I don't know where that leaves us.
Well, 414 just got introduced to a committee. It's not making crossover. So that's, it's not.
That's true. Okay.
I wouldn't worry about it because it's not even going to be a bill that will probably be able to be ready for the end of this session. So this is the live instrument for this conversation. So I would.
Good. Thank you for bringing me back to reality. I was getting my head all wrapped around here. Senator Polina?
Yeah, I just want to be clear whether what Michelle just read to us is in law now. And we're saying that it's possible that it would supersede the need for what we've been talking about doing in 414. It seems like 414 was a lot more specific. But are we feeling that we could go with what's in existing law, that what Michelle read to us, with maybe a little bit of tweaking, or do we think that's adequate? I guess what I'm saying, because 414 seemed to lay out a lot of particulars. And what Michelle read to us, which is in law now, it seemed more general. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just asking if that's really what we want to do.
Well, I don't know, Michelle, maybe you can comment on that, but I think that what isn't in there is setting up the fund.
Right, no, I agree with that.
And pre-funding it.
Yeah,
so,
no, that part we'd still need to do.
Yeah.
And then I
Right.
don't know how much detail we need to put in there, Michelle.
I
that
wouldn't,
isn't-
I'd let the people identified as being responsible for it design it and come back to us for us to confirm it. But I think it's premature, seeding it, yes, and then sending them off to design it. But I don't think we have the time right now or the expertise to do that here.
So we would be asking them to design the program, looking at other programs that have been successful, and to come back to us with how the program would be administered and how they would define who the preferred applicants are. Does that make sense?
To define eligibility so that we accomplish our goals in
Yeah.
enabling disproportionately affected populations.
Right. And that's a conversation that we can direct them to have, that conversation with the advisory board and with community groups. I
So
think.
this is the Cannabis Control Board having this empowerment.
No, I think
No.
that we're empowering ACCD to come
Oh,
back.
ACCD, okay.
Yeah.
And Agency of Ag, I believe, is included. I think Michelle
Yeah.
said that Ag was
Yeah.
included in that.
Well, that's just under existing law with regard to providing technical assistance. That doesn't have anything to do with loans. So,
Okay.
so I think so what I'm hearing from y'all is that you would establish the fund, you'd seed the fund with money for FY22, but you would kind of scope it out in terms of what you want the purpose of the fund to be, and that it would be a revolving loan fund, but that you would ask ACCD to come back to you with recommendations about the criteria, or do you want to allow them? I mean, I'm just trying to think of the timing aspects. So as you know, I don't know whether or not they're going to be able to follow the existing timeline, but it would be that the first applications under the current timeline would be accepted in March 1st of next year. And so I guess, in thinking about timing, if ACCD's got to come back to you and then you have to pass legislation in order to get the statutory criteria, then you might have a little bit of a time issue there. You could have, I hate to even entertain the idea, but we're probably going to be here sometime in the fall like we were last year, right? With the money.
Or through June.
I hate to totally book myself already in August after last year, but we could put a later date like that, and then you can pass it then, so that it's in place beforehand. I just want to kind of we have to think about this constantly evolving timeline and all the moving pieces, because things are really kind of crashing into each other. But does that generally sound like what it is that you want? So
I think so.
That ACCD would develop criteria and design a program for a revolving loan fund to enable this the population we've identified that we want to benefit from these opportunities.
Well,
right, but would they need to come back to you with their recommendations for the criteria and things like that, and then the legislature adopt it? You wouldn't be saying develop it and then go with it, right?
I think so.
Yeah, we need to approve it.
Okay.
And does the timing make sense for that? To do it
That's what I'm thinking in terms of I could do something where
they're going to be hammered between now and the end of, just given that money that's about to hit us from the feds, ACCD, a huge piece of that responsibility is going to be with ACCD. So just thinking of their timing and what we know, Keisha and I know from what they're going to get in Senate Economic Development,
Right.
We also have to be thoughtful about their time.
Right, but you don't want them reporting to you next January because
No.
that's gonna be too late. And
No,
so
I
you could
agree.
have them report to you July 1st, assuming that you're gonna, I don't know, I feel like I'm jinxing, I'm messing it up for everybody. Assuming
Yeah,
that you're gonna be here,
They-
you're not gonna fully adjourn when,
Right.
time.
ACCD does not have to be the one that does all the work here. They can hand this off to a committee made up of the advisory committee and some people from the CAP agencies or
Yeah.
however they want to do it. They don't have to.
Well, we could say that and encourage them in partnership with the
Yeah.
CAP agencies
And the advisory committee
and the advisory council or
and
whatever we
community
call it.
groups. I mean, they should be taking some. I think that the way we define this is going to be really important, and that is what they found in Massachusetts, and I believe in Illinois, was that they had good laws, but they were poorly implemented, and as a result, the people that they wanted to benefit from it were not the people who benefited from it. And this morning I'm just going to throw this out, this morning in judiciary, we looked at the definitions, and the definition of an impacted community is really all of Vermont, because you only have to meet one of the criteria. And so it really is all of Vermont, plus a lot of the rest of the country. And then if you look at the member of an impacted family that's eligible, it's an individual who has a parent, legal guardian, child, spouse, or dependent, or was a dependent of an individual who was arrested or convicted or adjudicated delinquent for something that's now expungible. That means that Joe Benning and his family are eligible under this because he was arrested for a marijuana conviction or a marijuana thing. He wasn't convicted, but he was arrested. And you certainly would not say that and he was the one that brought this up, that he was an disproportionately impacted person here. But it is so broad that it really needs a lot of work, and they should be working with the community groups and the advisory committee on who are the people that we're trying to get to here. Who are the people we're trying to do? And
it needs to be better targeted. And I think that if you involve community groups and the community action agency, the CAP agencies, I think you will have a great group. You'll have terrific input.
And yeah, I think that we need to have it be better defined, and yeah. Okay.
So can I ask just Allison, you
Yes,
said the cap, and you're using some jargon I don't work in.
Okay. It's
sorry.
the community action agencies are generally referred to as the CAP agencies, but they run the micro business. They run the micro business program, and they've just they did a huge amount in providing technical expertise and direct grants to disproportionately affected income communities. I mean, they deal with the smallest, newest business of low income people all over the state. They do a terrific job.
So if I just refer to the community action agencies as who they consult with, that's a known term, and that's fine to their legislation. Okay.
There are 5 of them that cover the state.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
And you have Capstone as yours.
I do know them. Yes.
Right. Sue Minter runs Capstone.
Yep.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to make sure you saw Monica's hand. It's been up for a while.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't look for little yellow hands, so thank you, Senator Rahm. Monica.
Yes, thank you so much. I don't mean to interrupt. It's an amazing conversation. I just wanted to let you know that I need to excuse myself. I've got a conflict and I didn't want to slink away. I wanted to at least say goodbye and thank you.
Thank you. And we'll invite you the next time we have the conversation. We'll make sure that you get on the list.
Great, thank you. And actually, I just wanted to add, because it has come up a couple of times, just to let you know that the interviews are happening now for the Cannabis Control Board.
Oh,
Because
good.
I wasn't sure if you were aware of that timeline. So that is moving forward.
Do you have an expectation of appointment?
Not yet, but certainly the interviews are happening. So I think that's obviously the very first step.
That's a start.
I will say there were really good candidates.
Yes. Agreed.
I was.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Monica.
Thanks, Keisha, for pointing that out. I never look for those little yellow hands. So, yes, Senator Collmore.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. That was why I raised my hand too. I saw her hand up. I don't normally check those, but the other thing I just want to mention, I think we need to be careful if we are assuming that we will be back. And I certainly don't have any inside information, okay? I really, really don't. But the governor has indicated that the timelines for the 1.2 billion, which will be coming to Vermont, extend at least 2 years out, so that there's not that pressure to allocate funds as quickly as we did in the past year. Remember, we had December 31st as the drop dead date to allocate funds that were coming from the COVID relief funding. So I don't know that we won't be coming back, but I don't think we can assume that we will either.
No, you think you're right, but I think we may be here for a bit longer.
So let's ask them if they can come back to us by, and I know this is putting a lot of pressure on them, but by the end of April.
You can try, and we should just ask them if that's realistic.
Well, it probably isn't realistic, but they can come back and say we can't do it by then.
So can I just ask, but you're saying you would put it in, you would informally ask them to come to you? Or you would put it in legislation and hope that this bill is going to pass the House?
It may not pass by that time.
We can informally ask them also.
Right. I would just remind you how long cannabis took in the House.
Thank you for that sobering fact.
Madam Chair, Martin.
You mean 5 years?
You know, we could just head this off by actually asking him in to testify this week.
Okay, I see Mark has his hand up. I see his little yellow hand there now.
That's a black hand, Madam Chair.
Oh, sorry about that. It looks yellow on mine.
No, it's fine.
The very funny.
I wanted to just for I guess more process. I wanted to just make sure I had some clarity on when it was appropriate in your committee to chime in, because I kind of wanted to come back. I wanted to come in about 15 minutes ago, and I feel like I just need to understand what that process is, so we can probably get some clarity on that. So as a result, I'm going to have to go back a little bit because there were some things that you were talking about earlier that I wanted to comment on. Would this be an appropriate time to do so, or should I just?
Sure. Sure.
Okay. So at the beginning of and there's so much, but at the beginning of the conversation about this particular area on I think it's 987 page 6 of 20.
Yeah.
Line 4. The first thing that you opened with is that the this here on line 8 with the fees that are collected pursuant section 990, which is integrated license, that there was already a pre-negotiated cap on that, or at least a discussion that was in play. And it sounded to me like it was to the tune of about $50,000. So I was just first of all curious to understand how that was arrived at, and because I think a lot of the rest of the conversation is really premised on that being limited to $50,000, or at least partially.
Well,
and also wanted to
go ahead.
Were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to try and answer that where that
I'll just
came
pause.
from. And I think that it was suggested in the original draft, if I'm not mistaken, and it was in judiciary, and the dispensaries agreed with it, the 3% up to the $50,000, which would essentially could be up to $250,000 since there are 5 dispensaries. But I think our thought here was that it would make that money isn't going to be generated until we're actually up and running. So
Until the fees are collected, correct? Yeah.
So is to pre-fund the program, and then these other fees can go into it, but to put some upfront money into it to get started.
Okay. So does that mean that this might be also towards for I don't know, maybe Michelle left us, but I was trying to understand at what point in the process the fees were actually collected.
By the way, Michelle ran out of power, so she'll be logging back in, but she's switching devices.
Yeah,
I don't think it's really important that question be answered right now. I was I can go back and research that myself, but I do understand the concept of one-time money and don't find it very useful for a process whereby there's something that we're trying to sustain, but definitely to get it off the ground, definitely. So I do appreciate that. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah.
Also,
Mark, if I can say, I don't think it's necessarily just one-time money. It's we're talking about pre-funding, but there could be an allocation from the Appropriations Committee every year. We're not assuming that it will be just one time. We are assuming that we should pre-fund it right now.
Correct. Thanks for that. And I think there was a conversation about, I think it's because I think I waited a little bit too long to get into this. So if I could just have just a little bit of leniency, just unpacking some of what I just heard just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
There's some question of earmarking funds into communities impacted by marijuana, in conversation about who should be benefiting from this revenue stream. I guess I would encourage the committee to read H414 because there's some language here that does speak, in fact, of disproportionately impacted areas,
mm-hmm.
not people, but areas. And that section is called a community, is 989, Community
Mm-hmm.
Social Equity Program. And that's how all of that gets fleshed out. So there's a whole group of folks that parade off and go figure out what this whole thing about this work that needs to be done in the community needs to look like, ex officios, blah, 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 if I can say that on the record. And I think so I think it's important to understand that some of these definitions, they apply to certain sectors and sections rather of the policy. And I think it mischaracterizes the policy. Again, it came from us. It mischaracterizes the policy to attribute various definitions to the policy broadly. So when we speak of social equity applicants, for example. I think we agreed in judiciary, and again, you have to appreciate the fact that I've been following this thing from this committee to judiciary, because this is how we do this. But what we agreed to is that there is in fact a need for some additional language, Senator Clarkson, that that would identify ownership or control by folks of the BIPOC community. We were actually urged to do that because in truth, this bill reflects if almost no language that would indicate anybody from the American descendants of slavery or BIPOC community. If you look at it closely, there's nothing in here. And we did that quite by design because we're afraid of the 14th Amendment, because we know that historically, just as you said, many people are of the mindset that you are of, and that is that they will try to dismantle this because it unfairly advantages certain people, and we're even calling that discrimination now. So this is, so I just wanted to make it clear that, just catching up with you, that disproportionate impacted areas refers to 989, which really goes right into the conversation that Senator Rahm started earlier. It addresses that, and it talks about that whole piece. I know we're not going to cover that right now, but the conversation of social equity applicants, which is that definition there, it applies to 989. I think I'm pairing these up right. If you're looking in 989, that's when you start talking about this whole idea of, I'm sorry, I beg your pardon, 987. Mm-hmm. Social equity applicants refers to 987.
Yes.
So if you're looking at the Cannabis Business Development Fund, and under the definition of social equity applicants, that is where we would insert the additional language outlining that in addition to these that are highlighted, and that if you read those carefully, it talks about ownership, it talks about a person's been convicted, so on and so forth, but that would be added in addition to those. It wouldn't be a sole criteria, just like, Fisher versus Texas, you can't have it as a sole criteria. It would be one of several criterias that would need to be satisfied there, which would really fill that out quite nicely. And then back over to the whole Cannabis Development Fund. And I appreciate being able to unpack this because there were some questions, there was some discussion about the ACCD, and as well as the network, the Community Justice Network, which is actually outlined later in this policy. The Community Justice Network is actually identified later in this policy. There's this, I think, this mindset where you've arrived at that the language was already in 164, and I just wanted to state that we were fully aware of the language in 164 when we crafted 414. It's the reason why we crafted 414, because we didn't view the language in 164 as being sufficient to accomplish these equity this equity work that we were seeking to accomplish, and that was evidenced by the comments that the governor made in his non-signing statement. So when you start looking at the ACCD, it's very important to understand that, with H336 that's in play right now, H336 is in play right now. One of the things that Curtis Reed brought to their attention in his administration, administration of the $2.5 million this last year, was his inability to get his hands around technical assistance, nor does ACCD have that capability right now. So they're currently in play right now trying to add capacity even to ACCD. They just don't have it right now. And the other point that I want to point out is it's very important that we're talking about some very targeted and very specific work that needs to be done in these communities. And I know CAP is being mentioned and ACCD is being mentioned, but if they were actually fitting the bill for what it is or the type of work that we're talking about, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And again, this goes back to the problem that we have with systemic racism, is these services and how they're delivered in the mechanisms in which they are delivering them with, they are not reaching our communities. Again, I cannot speak for every Black person in Vermont, but I can speak for the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance, and I can also give you the premise upon which we brought this bill to you. We're doing work in economic development right now. We're doing work in housing right now. We're doing work in healthcare right now. In every single one of these systems, the system is missing us, okay? Which is why we're doing this work. So it's an invalid assumption to assume that the ACCD is going to be Johnny on the spot on this. And it's also an invalid assumption to assume that the network or the community justice centers network is going to somehow or another, be able to fill in and be Johnny on the spot here, as well as place additional stuff on the racial equity executive director's plate and thinking that she's going to somehow or another be profoundly more impactful with less resources when we haven't even, assured that. So I think, respectfully, I think that I think the trajectory that you are on is mispremised, and I think it's misdirected. And I hate to be that person in the room about it, but I think there are more things that we need to unpack here surrounding what it is that we're trying to solve. And I think somehow or another we need to comport our minds to understanding that the traditional systems that we're trying to invoke in solving these problems is like using a screwdriver when you really need a hammer. And I don't mean that forcefully, no pun intended, but what I'm getting at is I think that I would kindly request that you strongly consider giving additional attention to the policy that we've submitted in 414 and the fact that it is in fact thought out, that we have put quite a significant amount of thought in it. And I would also urge you, if you could please, to not only consider this section here in 987, but also, as I had indicated earlier, in the area of 989 is crucially important that you please take a look at that and understand how all of this goes together. And then finally, towards the end of this policy, over in the area of integrated licenses, which is section 3 of this policy, it lays out that it lays out all of the criteria that we would prefer integrated licenses holders to be able to sign up for, to be able to really lift this program up in a sustainable way. Thank you for the time, and I'll stick around.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that, but we are not going to deal with H414. That's a House bill, and there is no way on earth that we can deal with H414 before Friday. We will deal with H414 when it comes back to us, whenever they get it. And I appreciate that comment. And I thought we had committed to taking up the conversation of communities and how to best get this work done in communities at a different time, as opposed to today. And so I'm a little confused now about, and I will say that on page 5 of S25, on the original bill, the Judiciary Committee is changing that language under social equity so that it actually specifically points out that it's BIPOC communities and socioeconomic communities. I don't know if Michelle is working on that, but we talked about that this morning. And so that's being done by the Judiciary Committee. So we didn't talk.
Just as a point of clarification, the reason why we're talking about H414 is because that language there is the language that you introduced out of 987. So
the sections we're looking at, 986 through 990, are lifted from 414.
Exactly.
No.
Thank you. So that's the clarity is that we are talking about 414. And then the other piece is that and Michelle, you could probably go back for the record, but I think the last thing we did in judiciary this morning was agreed that we were going to have a conversation in Senate Gov Ops about Section 3. I think that's the very last thing that we agreed upon before we left that committee this morning. So I was under the impression, because I think Senator Bayruth made it very clear that anything that we arrived at, any conclusions that we arrived at in this committee, that we would need to go back and bring it to judiciary. So I'm running back and forth from Senate Judiciary and House Gov Ops to get this done, and I'm willing to do whatever it is to get this done. So I'm a willing player, and you just tell me how you want to get this done.
Well, what I want to do is, if we have some language to add to Section 3 of S25, that's fine. I am not willing to add all the language from H414 around the communities and that's a House bill, and they're going to deal with that. And we do not have time to start picking apart that language. We can't do it. I don't know if other committee members feel that way or not, but just the issue that I brought up about Joe Benning being qualified under this, he absolutely would be a person who would, under this definition, would get preference for one of these loans. And that doesn't make any sense to me, because it says the member of a family. That's exactly what it says in here. And it says under social equity applicant, you have to meet one or more of these. If you've been arrested or convicted, or are a member of an impacted community. So that is the definition in here. And that's why I think that we need to have somebody, from my perspective, if the House wants to pass it like it is, that's their business. But I for one cannot put that into S25. I don't know where other committee members are on here, but I can't do that. I think that we need to add the Cannabis Business Development Fund, and I think we need to pre-fund it, and we can say where other funding sources might come from in the future. And we can ask ACCD to work with whoever the groups are that should be involved in this to help to come up with some suggestions about who would be eligible applicants. But, and I don't know who those, I don't know if it's, Keisha had suggested the advisory committee. That might be the group, or it might be somebody else. Keisha, did you have?
I don't know if this simplifies things but complicates them more, but I'm personally thinking people from historically marginalized groups, which David Hall has been helping define through Ledge Council, maybe others have too, those who've been incarcerated on a charge related to cannabis, and the advisory board can come up with other categories as needed, or as sort of they look at that and decide that it's inadequate.
And is it and or?
The historically marginalized is or incarcerate. I don't know. I haven't thought that exactly through, but I think if you've been incarcerated for marijuana, you're very reluctant. You need technical assistance. You're very reluctant to do anything that could be seen as potentially on the wrong side of the law. I think it would be a fair thing to do, even if that person doesn't come from a historically marginalized group, but I'd be willing to let that go if the rest of the committee disagreed. I'm just trying to think small groups of categories, and then the advisory board can add if they.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just want them to have some criteria besides just having been incarcerated, because there are people who've been incarcerated who come out and do very well for themselves. And I would hate to see somebody, I guess, like they did in Illinois, put a person in as the titular head of a company to get the funds. So I think that there need to be some some more criteria than just that you've been incarcerated. And
Agreed. I think you need a bunch of criteria, and I think that this is where some of the technical expertise and ACCD and the CAP agencies would be helpful in establishing them.
I think we need to involve the communities that are being affected here, because I think Mark is right that the people who are currently doing the business clearly don't understand the impact that it's had on, I think the term Keisha used was historically marginalized communities. So we need to have that voice in there in helping them to determine but Keisha, you had a good idea to just have a couple categories and then have the board.
The advisory. I'm really enjoying giving the advisory board more authority. I just think it should have, it's a broader group of stakeholders who we're pulling together, who have a range of lived and professional experience around these topics. And that's the group I'd want to look to answer some pretty specific questions.
Okay, I think I like that idea. And then, so that would be in section 3 of S25, right? That we would add that language to A and B.
Yeah, I look to Michelle to see if I don't want to.
So on B I'm taking out B and totally redoing that and establishing the fund and then directing ACCD to report back to the General Assembly around the criteria, right, for the specifics for the program. And you said May 1st. The advisory board is only going to meet, according to your earlier amendment, they have to be seated by April 1st, which it's not even clear that the board will be seated by April 1st.
Right.
So I just want to make sure everybody's kind of keeping track of the calendar here.
We need wish we had our whiteboard up.
Right.
And once you make a decision, I can update. I have a long timeline of Act 164's rollout. I mean, I can put something together for you once you decide on this. I guess I just want to be careful about making it so tight. You get weeks behind and it falls apart. So
why don't we put that ACCD in consultation with the advisory committee and affected community groups, and they can figure out between those two, the advisory committee and ACCD, they should be able to figure out that they can talk to different groups of people. They can talk to the prisoners, right?
And quite honestly, ACCD's strength is going to be in establishing a program, a business program. That's what they're not necessarily the criteria for who's eligible. I mean, I think that's more the advisory council and the technical expertise is, a combination of ACCD and the CAP agencies. I think the criteria for who's eligible probably makes the most sense to have the advisory council or committee do it. ACCD's strength is in the business design and implementation. How does it work? How does it work well? How can we set up a revolving fund? All that stuff. That's where their expertise is.
Yep, you're right.
It's
Senator
not
Palmer?
in the.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we are going to informally ask them the amount of the pre-funding and that it be a revolving loan fund, but that's not necessarily going to go into the statute, right?
I think that we should put an appropriation on it. And I think that that's what Senator Sears thought, and Philip also, when we talked this morning, thought we should put an appropriation on here, but we'll ask them informally what they would suggest putting in
Okay.
as a pre-funded,
Come on.
the initial one.
Okay.
Right, because remember, it takes time for these businesses to set up and if it's going to be a revolving fund, it'll take time for them to do well enough to be able to hit a threshold where they're giving back into the fund. I mean, all that requires design and thought. I mean, when we first set up the first time homeowners down payment assistance program, it took 7 years for there to be enough money put back into the revolving fund for it to become a revolving fund. So all that stuff needs to be worked out to accomplish what we're trying to get at here. And it's going to take time.
So Michelle, why don't we say ACCD should come back with how a program would be set up and administered, and the advisory committee would come back with a report on what the criteria is for applicants.
Right. I think that's a good.
Yep. And
Does that make sense to you?
stick with that
Paige?
May 1st date.
I don't care what date you put in there. It's we're so far behind now. I don't know how to even do this.
Yeah. I think ask ACCD what's real. I mean, I don't think May 1st is realistic given what's about to happen.
Right.
They can probably set up the program really quickly. They have all
Yeah.
kinds of it would probably take somebody about half an hour to
Well, let's ask.
choose-
I mean, I think that's
to
a good.
choose from other programs that they administer. I think that
Yeah.
more time is going to be needed for the setting up the criteria for who's eligible.
Yep, I agree. Madam Chair, we've been sitting for 2 hours. I just have to stretch myself.
All right, so let's take a little break and then come back for a little while and then I want also to maybe we've hashed this one out enough that Michelle can get something written up for us and we can take it up again. And then, I mean, not today necessarily because you won't have time to do it today. And then let's look at the license structure that Graham talked about this morning. Senator
Is there a
Polina,
chairs meeting at 4 or not?
5.
Okay.
5.
They changed it to 5.
I agree. So it's just concern, and we can circle back around and have this conversation again because I think this is crossing over next week because this is a money bill. But I think that it's just concerning me that these are both recommendations from a board that hasn't been appointed yet. 3 folks that are going to come back with these recommendations, and then the other thing is one is they're just going to consider it.
I see that.
And then the last point I'll make is it goes beyond this. It's about the conclusion that has been made that the only option that's going to be available for these folks who are in these communities are loans, and
No.
loans are just problematic. Okay, well maybe I
I
misunderstood
said loans
that.
and grants. I said loans and grants.
Okay, well just scratch that then, and I'll just be done. Thanks.
But I think you're right. I think we can reword a little bit to make it clearer that they have to come back to us, not considering reduced, but how to implement a program for reduced or eliminated licensing fees.
Yeah,
then-
and there's some
Yeah.
definition challenges there too, because we tried to provide definitions and we kind of got slammed for that. But there's this use of disproportionately impacted in both of those paragraphs. Nobody defines that anywhere in this policy.
That is true. But I don't, I think that's what we're asking the advisory committee to come back with some definitions for that. That was
I
my
think-
understanding.
And not to belabor the point, but the challenge, I understand that we're asking for the ACCD and others to come back with definitions for that. But we're at the same time, we're using it in this policy to establish a criteria for some folks to come back and provide us a report on something. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to create a quagmire or anything like that, but it's just that, maybe we should define to the best of our ability, if we're going to use that in this policy, maybe we should define it or use something else. I think it doesn't hurt to say that my largest underlying concern with it is just the fact that we would need to wait for the CCB to come back to actually advise us on these matters. Because
Right.
it seems like they would be, seems like there should be a way we can get after that before that point. But I've taken enough time. Thank you for that. And I'd ask you to take it into consideration and please allow me to circle back around with you here or
Yep.
judiciary so we can close the loop on it.
Yeah, we definitely will. And we'll probably do this again on Thursday.
Yippee. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you. I got to run. Thank you so much for the time.
I got to shut my door here.
Thank you, Michelle.
Senator White, I just wanted to mention, and I think you know this, but some of the other members may not, is that term that's used there in section 3 and S25 that's the term that's used because it's used throughout Act 164 in a variety of places. And when that bill first passed Senate Judiciary in February of 2019, that was the agreed upon, term that people were offering around the issue.
Mm-hmm.
I realize that has changed and now people hate that phrase, and are looking to kind of change that. But in terms of being consistent right now, until there is a new, either the board either fleshing that out and identifying what that means through rule or you directing it some other way, we want to be consistent so that it doesn't create confusion around these different groups. So,
yeah. Well, the challenge is to do it so that you're not discriminating. That's I think also the fine line we tread here is that you can't discriminate.
It's a difficult issue, which is, I think, why
it is
chose for the board to be taking it up in the context of all the moving pieces.
Yeah, and I think the advisory board working out the criteria is good, and they can battle that piece out.
And my guess is that many of the people on the advisory board or who have been having thoughts about this have some thoughts already in mind, and so they can kind of figure that out. And clearly the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance came up with some definitions here. I'm not sure I like those definitions, but if that's what everybody comes up with, then I'm not going to start second guessing, but we'll ask the advisory board committee, I think it's called the advisory committee, to grapple with that. And they their representatives on that, as Keisha said, people who have different perspectives. And my guess is that they'll bring in a lot of the perspectives from the communities that they represent. To that discussion. All right. So I would say in A, just instead of saying, I think Mark is right, instead of saying shall consider reduced licensing fees, and I think Senator Sears was pretty clear about that too. He wants them to come in with a recommendation of how to reduce or eliminate fees, licensing fees. And then you're rewriting B, right? So committee, can we jump to the license structure? And Graham, are you still with us? You are.
I am.
Can you just talk a little bit, give us some, you had some, I thought, really good suggestions this morning on the license, how to word the licensing structure, because there are many issues here. There's the development of a craft license. I've suggested a CSA type license so that farmers could actually sell just to their own group of people, just like CSAs do. A different license for that. There's production caps. So you had some really good language, I thought, this morning about how to direct them without coming up with specifics, because we can't do that, but how to set the parameters that they need to look at here. And this is not in S25 at all anywhere right now. This would be an addition. Michelle?
I just, because the members of your committee weren't privy to our conversation this morning, that in Act 164, it directs the board to report back to the General Assembly recommendations as to whether the General Assembly should add additional types of cannabis licenses, including a craft cooperative license, delivery license, or special event license, or others. And so there is already a requirement for them to report back on whether or not there should be additional licenses. So I think what you're talking about is amending that and potentially expanding that.
Or,
Yeah, I think
why not just let them do their work? And
because we want to have them look at some very specific issues around the creation of those licenses. And I think that's what Graham has. It's not, okay, Graham, why don't you just talk to us a little bit about your suggestions about kind of putting some definition around what they should be looking at.
Thank you, Senator. And I can just quickly, let me just frame at least some of what we're suggesting here too, so this maybe makes a little sense to folks. I was asking the other question, but from the beginning, we've been asking for time in the ag committees because we feel like this isn't really a conversation for a 3-member CCB. This is more a conversation for a group of people who have expertise in the subject matter and who can bring in stakeholders from across, the farming community, the cultivator community, growing community, to have a conversation about this and to create some scale appropriate and agriculturally appropriate regulations. So we have worked with Vermont Grower System and Vermont Racial Justice Alliance and NOFA Vermont to come up with, and Trace as part of our coalition, to come up with some broad licensing ideas related to equity. So it essentially differentiates licenses based on scale, which is sort of gets to the craft consideration, which was the CCB was already directed to. But also we ask that they define and differentiate based on outdoor production, mixed light, and indoor cultivation, because there's a significant difference that cultivators will tell you about in terms of what you can produce, for example, in 1 year in a temperate climate outdoors versus what you can produce in a controlled environment indoors in Vermont. This is Juniper. She's trying to eat a little right now. We have some grandparents here giving a hand. So we wanted to make sure that the CCB, if we're going to direct it to the CCB, my recommendation would be to put in enough detail such that they're not just required to consider this, but that they shall actually implement and shall just make distinctions as we sort of suggest them based on scale, based on indoor, outdoor, mixed light cultivation, and we do have some specific ideas related to the craft license tiers as well. So what I suggested earlier today, and again, I do hope this goes to the Agriculture Committee so we really can have some conversation about this, because we also talk about production caps and supply management. And as I said earlier today, folks who understand how cannabis and other agricultural commodities what happens when they become commodified is they become priced based on economy of scale. The basic price point becomes unbearable for small producers, and that's why we have the situation we have in dairy production right now, where you have the huge farms, and we've lost thousands of dairy farms because there's an amazing amount of consolidation and concentration in that industry, and we've seen it in other states when the cannabis industry becomes commodified as well. So what we're trying to do is make an industry where as many people as possible can participate, and where people can actually make a decent livelihood by participating at a relatively small scale. So what I was suggesting is, for example, directing the CCB to define and differentiate licenses based on parameters related to indoor, outdoor, and mixed light cultivation, indoor scale of production, and to require them to institute production caps for all scales and types of operations. From our perspective, we have specific details that we suggested around fees, around scales, around definitions, but we are also, recognizing the challenges of this. I think that putting directives to the CCB, which require them to implement definitions and these specific distinctions, is something we'd be interested in looking at with you and seeing how close it would come to getting where we feel our community has asked us to get. Senator White, is that a decent summary? Do you want me to include anything else specific? I didn't get into too many of the details we really say because I don't think that's what you were interested in, but I can give some examples of what we would talk about in the Agriculture Committee.
Well, first of all, I'm not sure it will get to the Ag Committee, but you have 2 members of the Ag Committee here. So I would say that the distinctions, the licenses based on distinctions between scale, lighting, indoor, outdoor, and production caps for all of those. And I don't know if there are other parameters. I'm not sure that we can get into any more detail than that, but to tell them that they need to, when they're looking at developing licenses, they need to look at all of those things. Isn't that the way it makes sense, or am I not reading this right?
I mean, I think from our perspective, sort of similar to how Mark was saying last, the CCB shall consider. I don't think we're really. We would definitely continue to push at the legislative level for more specifics in legislation if the CCB were just considering. We want them to be mandated to make these differentiate by these scales. Yeah. This is sort of what equity, from our perspective. That's more what I was saying. And one of the things we know we can't deal with is part of what we're advocating for is that outdoor production of cannabis be considered agricultural. And that's a conversation we think would be really great to have in the ag committees. Yeah. We think there really are more scale appropriate ways of approaching this than across the board, taking all farmland in current use and taking all farmland and agricultural easements off the board, essentially taking some of your most experienced growers in the state who've been working for decades to try to affordably farm out of an industry where they might actually be able to make a decent livelihood or have a supplemental crop to make a decent livelihood.
No, I think I'll ask other committee members if they have any question. I think that you're right about leaving the question about the outdoor, whether it should be an agricultural crop or not, to the ag committee, because I don't think we can weigh in on that. But I did, when I was thinking about this, I wasn't thinking about that they should consider granting, differentiating the licenses in these categories, but that they need to differentiate the licenses based on those criteria. Michelle?
So I had a question because the current law requires the board to establish tiers within the license categories. Mm-hmm. So right now it's required for them to establish a bunch of tiers for cultivators and for retailers, and then they have discretion to do it for all the other types of licenses. So I'm not clear on when adding something and saying that they have to consider and then report back to the General Assembly on licenses on the scale aspect, like as to scale. I don't understand how that's different from the tiering that's in there now. So I just need a little more explanation of what's does that bring, so I can just clarify that, because
okay.
Could you clarify what you mean by tiers? Is that based on, you're talking about size?
Yeah. So I don't know if you remember, Anthony, but the predecessors to S54 that y'all worked on for a few years there, we had in there that you had established various tiers within each license category. So you might say, tier 1 is 1,000 square feet or less from a canopy standpoint. And then the next tier is this size, the next tier is that size. So, and I'm obviously not an expert in the growing aspect.
Sure.
So for me, thinking about it, I think of when you're talking about the tiers, you're talking about the scale of the operation. And so you're talking about how much space you're using for that operation to be cultivating. So when you're asking to put new language in there about having them identify licenses and things like that for related to scale, I'm just not clear on how that's different from what they're required to do now, which is to tier based on size.
Well, one thing might be, tiering by size says I can grow on X amount of acres, let's say. Whereas a supply management program, that the kind of thing that Graham was referring to, would say you can only grow as much, so many pounds per year.
Right,
or
I got
something like
that on production caps. I understand the production cap business, but I didn't understand what scale means separate and apart from the production caps.
Good question.
So
Yeah.
Graham or Jeffrey?
Why don't I start and then I can hand it over to Jeffrey, but just a reminder that the idea wasn't to just suggest language around tiers. We have actually specific suggestions around scale and size, and because we can't get the details considered legislatively, we're trying to work with something which gives language like this. So sorry, I'm just getting some help here. It's pretty distracting. So currently, Senator Flynn, what we're suggesting is, yes, tiers based on size, and tiers could be interpreted however, I think, based on the current language in the legislation, right? They could tier it based on anything. We've suggested tiers based on size, differentiated by outdoor, mixed light, and indoor, because they both have substantial different potentials for growth over periods of time. And we've also suggested not production caps, in our case, based on amount of product, but actually based on acreage for outdoor and square feet of indoor space, or square feet for both. We just converted it to acreage. And I'll pass it on to Jeffrey just because I'm being sort of distracted and I can come back and just listen and see if I can help.
Thanks.
So one thing that, and I have Act 164 in front of me, and thank you for highlighting that, Michelle. It is on page 42, if anyone has that in front of them as well. We expand on that. So for instance, there is no distinction between indoor and outdoor, which is crucial, which will be developed, if not now, then by the CCB. And why do we bring that up? We see differences in grow ratios by different states. So for instance, I believe Oregon is 1:5 outdoor. We adopted a 1:4 ratio, which is what we see in Northern California, which means for every 1,000 square feet inside, you get 4,000 square feet outside. That seems to be an adequate ratio for outdoor and indoor cultivation in terms of meeting production. And I want to be mindful here, stepping back for a moment, we're not, we're pro legalization, but we really want regulation. So that's what we're talking about here. We want to define as much of this regulation for Vermonters as possible. One thing we see in other states is them, and you guys aren't alone, grappling with what's legislative and what is in the territory of rulemaking. And what we've seen a lot of states come to realize after having a mature market is they develop licensing at the legislative level. So that's one reason why we are suggesting this, and we've approached it this way. We're also mindful of the formation issues that we have right now with this law. It's significantly behind. We think that it could catch up still, but we don't want to see these significant delays manifest or materialize with licensing at a later date. The CCB has a lot on its plate right now. So, and I think that we all have expressed those concerns. So we're trying to, and I understand that sort of late in the process, but we are trying to assist as much as possible by trying to define as much as possible. And I understand shifting to suggestions as opposed to having the time to define these at, through process. I understand that. So hopefully I spoke to some of the parameters with regards to differentiating between indoor and outdoor. And I'm happy to take any questions that you guys may have.
Any questions here? I'm not sure where to go with this. I thought that we were. Yes, Senator Clarkson.
I guess I'm just feeling like I feel like, and I know I'm not an expert on this, but I do feel like the cart is really before the horse. Why can't we just let the CCB get started and then have all these people with these great ideas testify in front of them while they're creating these rules, instead of our trying to micromanage the CCB? And we've given them the tiers to get going with, and then all these groups will be testifying in front of the CCB board. Why are we doing their work? Strikes me, this is their work. This is what they need to do.
I think that the suggestion was to just put a few more parameters around what they're doing. That if we haven't clearly defined tiers, and if we haven't made any distinction between indoor and outdoor and mixed lighting, I don't know. I just
but can't that be a conversation with them directly when they're weighing this?
Yeah, I think that the thought was to tell them that they had to consider this when they're doing it. These are the things that they need to look at when they're considering this. Senator Polina, and then
Well, I was
Senator
just say, I agree with what you're saying. I think what we're talking about doing is telling them that as they develop their criteria for licenses, they shall include, the tiers and indoor, outdoor, like they shall actually include these things. So that still means they would have to go out and hold hearings and take testimony and decide exactly how to do it. But we're telling them what they should include. We're not recommending, we're saying you shall do these things.
Senator Collmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Does the CCB have rulemaking authority?
That's what they're going to be spending their first year.
Yes.
Okay,
And,
so
that's what's going to be taking, and if I can just say, as part of that is the indoor outdoor mixed lighting production caps. That's all like in everybody's rules. Like that's just part of what you do if you're the CCB and you're establishing the tiers and the licenses. That's all going to be part of their discussion. I mean, you can certainly tell them to look at those things, but they're going to look at those things anyway.
So I guess my suggestion would be that we send an MOU or some sort of letter once they have been appointed and ask them to please concentrate on the areas that both Graham and Jeffrey have suggested as being important. In other words, I don't know that we need to get involved on a statutory level. I think they could do it with rulemaking, and it's a little bit more nimble than a statute. It's not 100% more nimble, but that way, if they err one way or another, their ability to redo it seems to me a little bit easier than just having to do a whole new bill. But that's just one idea.
So
Well,
when
I
they
guess
sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Michelle.
I was just going to say, so when they go through rulemaking, you guys probably know rulemaking even better than I do. You probably deal with that pretty regularly in this committee. So, there's a long process. They'll issue draft rules, they'll take comments, they have to respond to comments, they'll have some hearings, maybe they'll have some hearings around the state. They'll go through all of that. And that's originally why, when you set up 164, was to allow that level of kind of minutia detail around, what kind of security measures are appropriate for an outdoor grow that's only 1,000 square feet. Does it need to be the same as what it is for an indoor, $10,000 square, like all of that kind of stuff was for the board to be working through the rulemaking process and hearing from people who want to be a part of the industry and getting their recommendations for it.
So I'm hearing from some people that we need to set a little more guidance for them in telling them what they have to look at, and from others that we don't need to. So where are we? And I see it's Graham's little yellow hand.
Thanks, folks. Just in relation to that conversation, one of the reasons we did this was because we saw a lot of these details spelled out for the medical industry and integrated licenses. We also saw details which articulated what the smallest scale of craft license would be, and we weren't satisfied with that. We really didn't feel like it was appropriate or equitable to define it for the already most established and most heavily moneyed part of the industry, but to sort of leave the rest of us hanging out to dry and be like, well, just wait for the CCB. They'll articulate, you have a rulemaking process. It's not the Agency of Agriculture. If the Agency of Agriculture were doing a rulemaking process, we'd have a bunch of people with expertise in the agricultural field too. It would make more sense from us to be able to speak to the agricultural committees, have a conversation about this, make some more clear directives so the CCB can make some decisions on. But right now we have very little for our constituents defined, and there's a lot defined for the dispensary side of the industry. So that's part of our concern here, is that we felt like we need to reach out and define some stuff, because otherwise we're going to be left out to dry like we were in Act 164. And maybe Jeffrey has some more comments.
Okay, let me just jump in and ask Graham a question if I could. If we were able to get you to come into Senate Ag, and obviously you get two of the members here, are you suggesting, Graham, that then we would take further testimony and then Ag would somehow get that information to the Senate Judiciary on S25 to be added?
I'm not suggesting a particular process point. I'm suggesting that the Agriculture Committee is the appropriate place for this testimony to be taken, for these changes to be made. And we're appreciative that Senator White and Sears have been making the time to try to figure out with us how to most appropriately do it. I think it's more in your realm of expertise to figure out how to do that from a process perspective would be. But I'm open to supporting that and doing what we can. We've been reaching out for 2 years now trying to get the Ag committees to hear this. So that's where we're at with that.
Just, may I ask a question?
Yeah.
So if we, if this bill, is then now going to the House. I mean, the House Agriculture Committee could take the time to explore this and add this work also. Would that make any sense? I mean, we don't have to have this bill in perfect form.
Right.
I mean, it's going to the House. The House will spend a lot of time on it, as Michelle already noted.
I think that Senate Government Operations spent a lot of time on it. I think Senate Ag or House Ag spent time on it.
Well, we could ask them to. I mean, on this piece anyway. I'm all for adding something, but I also just feel like we've given CCB the tools, and hopefully they're up and running in the next month. And it just, anyway.
All right. Well, let's see if we can convince Ag to take it up. What's your schedule like tomorrow?
I happen to have our agenda right here. Tomorrow we're going to look at S61. Agricultural land use value appraisals. And I think that's the only thing on the calendar right now. So it might, I don't see anything else tomorrow. There's a lot of TBDs later in the week.
So perhaps the two Ag members on this committee could convince the chair to take, and the vice chair, who's very interested in this, to take this up tomorrow and look at it, and if they can come up with some language, and if not, we could look at it again on Thursday.
Well, that might be a little bit ambitious in terms of taking up tomorrow, But I'd certainly be willing to,
Or
talk to you.
Thursday morning.
Yeah, that probably would be a little bit easier to accomplish. Senator Polina, what do you think?
I think you're right. I think, tomorrow is a possibility, but Thursday is more likely.
Do you want to contact Senator Starr? Do you want me to?
Well, I think we should do it together. I mean,
Okay.
so, I'd be willing to write to him and CC you or say that you and I have been involved in these conversations.
Okay. Yeah. Mention that Graham wants to come in, and Jeffrey, for that matter, if he wants to. And
I think that you have, Senator Pearson was very, he was the one that actually got the current use language that's in 164 in there.
That's right. I remember that. Yep.
I mean, he's the one that brought it up. So who's your
So let's
fifth
just-
member?
Corey Parent.
Corey Parent. So just to finish this thought, because I could write him an email soon, but what are we actually saying? We're saying that in GovOps, we've heard testimony regarding the impacts on agriculture that we think need to be worked out before the Agriculture Committee to have input into the bill. I mean, just generally like that.
I would think so. Yep.
Okay.
So you're looking at all of the agriculture issues that the topics that have been raised by the witnesses?
Yeah. Are you asking or?
I'm asking because I'm wondering if I'm gonna have to staff it or not, or if I pull in.
That's what I was just wondering too, is whether you were available.
When?
Well, either tomorrow or Thursday.
It depends. I'm in a lot, with crossover, I'm pretty booked.
Sure.
Depends on when. But if, a lot of this stuff on the ag stuff really isn't appropriate for me anyway. I mean, I know certainly, obviously all the cannabis stuff and 164 in and out, but if it's going to go into, deep into ag policy and stuff like that, that's not really me.
Okay.
So that would be Michael.
Right.
I can talk to him. That's why I was just trying to understand the scope of it, because the witnesses have presented like a real kind of wholesale overhaul of a lot of the ag stuff. And if it's going to be that, it should be Michael, because he's the one who he's the one who handles land use. He's the one who handles current use. He's the one who handles all of that kind of stuff. It's not me.
Right.
Actually, Anthony,
Okay.
I just looked at our agenda, and tomorrow might make more sense because we literally don't have anything else after the S61 consideration tomorrow. We do have something else on Thursday. We have maple syrup at 10:30. Friday, well, Friday's probably too late. Tomorrow, if we could get folks in around 10:30 in the morning, it might work.
Graham, are you around tomorrow at 10:30ish?
I should be coming out of the House Agriculture Committee at that time. I'm in House Ag at 9, so I'll probably be, yeah, you see them.
Hi.
She's just learning to wave. Zoom is such an interesting interactive platform compared to any other screen. But she doesn't see screens really otherwise. Yeah, I can do my best to be available, and I really do appreciate the efforts you all are willing to put in here. I think it would be really helpful and appreciated, and I would certainly make a time. I don't know if Jeffrey's available. Jeffrey, what do you think?
10:30 tomorrow?
Well, as a guess, yeah.
Sure.
How about Michelle?
Michelle's not sure.
I can also reach out to Maddie Kempner, who's been working with us from the Northeast Organic Farmers Association on this as well, and see if she's available there.
Okay.
So Graham, how would you describe to Senate Ag Committee what it is you want to talk about?
I mean, I'm happy to send you, I think I actually did this weekend already send everybody on that committee copies of sort of some of our proposed language, summary findings, and some bullets. And I think you all framed it pretty well, though, just talking about some agricultural aspects of this legislation, which are most appropriate for the Agricultural Committee to look at, and which, you know, Senate Judiciary and Senate Government Ops have felt are outside of their purview.
Got Graham's email, Anthony, Saturday at.
Yep, I see it.
Okay. So maybe you could cut or copy and paste some of the sentences in there. And I don't know whether the chair will allow it or not, but I think if 3 out of the 4 or 3 out of the 5 committee members want to, I don't see any reason why we could.
So Senator Sears is also, I believe, sending your committee a request to take it up, and maybe I'll do the same thing from our committee.
Okay.
Okay.
So can we, there's one other, Michelle, there's one other issue on here that we were supposed to look at, is on page 5 of S25. And that's the integrated license. So do you want to explain that to us? It's section 2.
Starting on line 10.
You're muted.
I'm going down to one device now. So section 2, integrated license. Remember, the integrated license is only available to the existing dispensaries, as long as they're in compliance with their license and they meet the requirements under Act 164. They would be granted an integrated license, which would allow them to stay vertically integrated under one license. And so the way that they work now under the cannabis medical program is just under one license rather than having separate licenses for each of the different types of things they engage in, so that they could enter the adult use cannabis market with an integrated license. The current language basically says as long as they qualify and they meet all the conditions, that they shall be issued the license. There's a tweak to line 21, and I realize it probably just escaped editing. Right now, the current law says there shall be no more than 5 total integrated licenses. That's current law. And I don't know where that not came from. I don't know if one of the editors put it in there or something, but that doesn't change anything substantively. The only change is on page 5 on lines 2 and 3, where it changes the shall to a may, so that it would allow the board the discretion about whether or not to issue an integrated license. So even if the applicant met all the criteria, the board could just say, no, we're not going to issue any integrated, or we're only going to issue 2 integrated. Whereas the current law right now says basically if they qualify, then they should be issued the license. The thing that's important to note about if you go from the shall to the may, and then it kind of, it does have repercussions in terms of the other licenses and also for your funding mechanism. Reason why, so the way that the implementation is set up is that the first people to get licenses next spring are the small cultivators, testing labs, and the integrated licensees. The reasoning behind that is if you look at the other states that have gone from a medical to an adult use program, they've all kind of let the existing medical dispensaries roll out first because they're already up and running. And that's a way to get some revenue coming in to support the system that you're going to roll out. And so the idea in 164 is that the small cultivators could start growing, and the integrated could be growing and start selling immediately to the public. And then the small cultivators, once under that new license, can sell to both dispensaries and integrated licensees. And so you could get the small cultivators into the market and making a profit under the new license, rather than waiting until the retailers are online, which would be at the earliest October. So if you wind up not having the integrated go early, it also kind of there's no market for the small cultivators. There's nowhere for them. There's nobody for them to sell to. So I just want to note that. There's also means that you don't have any tax revenue coming in until October of FY23 rather than April of FY22. So just know that that's going to affect your pocketbook there in terms of the revenue coming in. And not that it's necessarily going to be, I don't know, I know there's everybody kind of flocks to it right at the beginning, but why I mentioned the revenue is not so much for the general fund purposes or substance abuse fund, but you're running at a deficit for the board for the first year, absolutely, probably the second year, maybe the third year, because the board is only supported through fees, through licensing fees, things like that. The tax money, doesn't go in to support the running of the program. And there's a provision in Act 164 that if there is still a hole in the fund that supports the board's work, that the tax revenue is supposed to go and fill that so that you're not running at this big deficit for years and years. So if you shorten it, it just means you're going to have less revenue to be able to fund. You're going to have to come up with money to appropriate to the board to run the program rather than using tax dollars from the early sales to backfill the deficit. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So committee, the question this morning was, and it got put off to us about whether we should leave shall or may. And one of my concerns with putting may in there is that there's no criteria for why they would deny it. I mean, they could just decide that they don't like the guy that comes in and deny the license. So where our committee do you know enough about this now that you think you could weigh in? Virginia, do you want to just, where are you?
Well, the dispensaries, would like to, have the shell remain. The dispensaries, want to partner with the state. They want to see this get up and running as soon as possible. And, having the small growers be licensed to start to sell their products, which would then, I know it was mentioned earlier this morning about, some growers probably wouldn't want to sell to the dispensaries because it would be the dispensary's product. But what the dispensaries have said right along is that, if Farmer Virginia is selling a product to us, it's going to go on the shelf as Farmer Virginia. It's not going to be under the dispensary. It'll be sold in that integrated license. But, and so I think really it's, how soon do you want to start getting, income coming into the state? And again, the dispensaries have that ability to, they have an integrated license now. They do everything. And as I said this morning, they don't want to be a monopoly. They want to work with the state and, recognizing that, there's going to be a lot of other people coming into the program. And this will just get some small farmers going, get the integrated license going, and having money come in to fund everything.
I see Graham has his hand up.
Thank you. I just had a question, actually. If, one of the things we've been trying to achieve, and this is sort of similar to what you were talking about this morning, Senator White, if there were, for example, a CSA model or a direct sale model where a farmer was allowed to sell the product they produce on their own farm from the farm or to customers through a CSA, would that be considered an integrated license? Would they need to have a license that they'd be doing retail, potentially processing and cultivation and just selling it directly? And I guess I want to be, when there's a limitation on integrated licenses, would that be considered an integrated license if it contained all three of those, or would it have to be called an integrated license for it to be considered an integrated license?
My guess is that that would be a CSA license. That it wouldn't be an integrated license.
Okay, so like in our proposal, we call like a small farm license where anybody who's at a certain scale of production could sell their own product from their site with a particular type of license which enabled on-farm processing and retail of on-farm product.
If that's one of the licenses that's developed, yeah, that's the way I would see it. I think the integrated licenses, there can't be more than 5 of them because there are right now 5 dispensaries. So there wouldn't be more than that.
Correct. I just wanted to make, if those if someone were at some point given the allowance to do multiple functions, would that, for example, act by the CCB be preempted by a law which said, well, there's only 5 integrated licenses allowed, and this is functionally an integrated license, right? Like they can retail and cultivate and process.
I don't know, Michelle, what do you think? I see that.
No, you would, the way that it's set up now is that if you want to be, if you want to do that, you would get a small or whatever size tier cultivation. You would get a, micro processing, and then you get, although there's not a processing, it's more like there's the wholesaler. I don't know that you could probably just have a cultivation and a retail and have the smallest tier of license for the cultivation and the retail license. And then you would engage and do what you want to do, which is direct selling to consumer from the farm. So potentially they may come up with one license that does that and has some things like that, but you can still do that under the current system. You would just have 2 licenses. You'd have you'd have a mini, small cultivation license, and you'd have a small tier retail license.
I think we understand that, and that's part of what we see as potentially problematic. Is like, what is the cost of all these licenses for someone who, for example, is a small farmer, they can't compete in a wholesale price world. They can compete by directly selling their product. Are they going to have to pay the same amount of fee to set up a retail license and a processing license, as opposed to having a more accessible integrated license?
I think that we aren't establishing fees. And I think that when the board considers this, they're going to consider that if they have different tiers and the fees are going to be different for different tiers, you're not going to have the same fee. And then it might end up being that there is a CSA license. You only have to have one. They may do that. I don't know. I don't think that we can get into that level of detail here. Does that help? So committee?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that that the language around limiting the number of integrated licenses wasn't limiting the functional integration of licenses in even like a CSA or a small farm license, like you're suggesting. And it sounds like the interpretation currently is no.
Yeah. That's my interpretation. And I'll argue with the board if they don't like that interpretation. Senator Collmore?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So are we only to decide whether it should be shall or may? And if so, what's the negative side of making it shall?
It is shall right now.
That's what I mean.
I don't know why it was put in here as a may. I see that I'm one of the sponsors of this bill. I don't know why it was put in there as may instead of shall. I mean, personally, I think it should be shall.
Makes sense to me.
It was in response to, and I don't know specifically what the concern was, but it's something from the governor with regard to the integrated or the dispensaries being able to get integrated licenses. So.
But they already have them now.
No, dispensaries are under the medical program and they're integrated under their medical license. If they want to enter the adult use, they would have to get an integrated under the new adult use program. So those would be separate. And I think it just goes to the issue of what some of the witnesses are saying, that they feel as though the dispensaries have an unfair advantage. And so this was just, I think, somewhat of a placeholder maybe for senators to at least have the conversation around the issue of integrated licenses to dispensaries.
And did Senate Judiciary just not want to take it up, or why is it?
Because we were as unfocused there as we are here. And it just got, I don't know how else to say it. This dealing with this bill in two different committees and it not really having a home anywhere is, I mean, it really should be 3 different committees, and it'll end up being 5 committees if Ag takes it up. So I think that's why. And that's my best guess. So Jeffrey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to bring everyone's attention to the consolidation that occurred over the past year. So between S54 being introduced and then it passing into law or enacting in, I guess, October of last year, just want to remind everyone that, of the large businesses that operate in the state, these are multi-state operators. MSOs is what they're called in the industry. One of our dispensaries, I believe Champlain Valley Dispensary, is the only locally independently owned, but the rest are owned by large out-of-state companies. And there was consolidation over the past year, over the course of you guys deliberating the bill last year. Curaleaf purchased Grassroots Inc. These are 2 large players. I just wanted you guys to be aware of that. Curaleaf is based out of Massachusetts, and Grassroots Inc. is based out of Illinois. They are both license holders in this state. Historically, they own, I believe, I guess, 2 different or maybe even 3 different medical dispensary licenses. I don't know how their consolidation factors into the issuing of these integrated licenses come next year. I at least want you guys to be aware of that industry activity.
Keisha?
So it's almost 5 o'clock and I'm just wondering, I feel like from my past experience, if we were in the building, we would ask someone on our committee to have lunch with someone on Ag and some of these advocates and sort of help us solve this in a way that really honors their expertise. I'm just wondering if we could spend a few minutes maybe now on what even makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, we
Good
can,
point.
but this issue is not an Ag issue.
This is a licensing issue.
Yeah.
This is whether the integrated, whether they have to give them, if they qualify,
Yeah.
Can the Cannabis Control Board just say, no, we're not going to give it to you?
Mm-hmm.
That's the question here. This isn't an Ag issue.
Well, it's called the Cannabis Control Board. I mean, aren't they controlling? Isn't this exactly what they're doing?
So the question is, do we give them, here's the way I look at this. We had if they qualify, if someone qualifies, one of these 5 entities, there can only be 5. If one of them qualifies and applies for it, in our original legislation, we said, if they qualify, they meet all the requirements, you give them the license. What this says now is, even if they qualify and they are one of those 5, you have the right to just tell them you don't want to give them the license. That's what this may and shall is.
And these 5 are independent from the 5 medical dispensaries.
No,
which
they are the 5. They are the 5 dispensaries. If you read, it says that an integrated license is only available to an applicant and its affiliates that hold a dispensary registration on April 2022. So it's only the dispensaries, and there are only 5 of them, and that's why there are 5.
And just so I can be clear, is that so with their integrated license, that allows them to engage in all of the activities, but they can only have one location, one point of serving the public. So there will be, let's say, if all 5 licensees wanted, dispensary licensees wanted to get an integrated, the maximum number of retail shops that would be owned and run by just, the entities that also own dispensaries would be 5. So it doesn't allow multiple points. I just wanted to.
And
It isn't.
So
It
they
isn't
can't be
that
like McDonald's and have
Right.
like license and then franchise out through the state.
Right. So
as
you're talking
opposed to
about
the
5
towns, which are the franchise at the moment,
No.
there could be 241
No.
shops.
No, we're talking about 5 retail establishments, a maximum of 5 here with this.
I know.
Senator Collmore?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I can appreciate, Michelle, what you said about sort of giving the dispensaries a little bit of an advantage over other people. But that advantage, as I think you put the timeline out, will only last for about a year until fiscal year 23, correct? When everybody
Even
else.
last a year. It's just from April of next year until October when retailers. So May.
Okay.
July.
Yeah.
5 months.
So six months.
Okay, then I want to make it shall.
Okay. Senator Ram?
I didn't have my hand up, but Graham does.
I know, but it's almost 5 o'clock.
Okay. Is it may or shall? Is it may or shall?
Yeah.
I'd like to listen to other people on the committee because I'm just feeling like I don't know. I don't trying to absorb last year's.
Okay, I'll weigh in. I think it should be shall, because I don't think that they should have the discretion to just not give it to someone just because they don't feel like it. If they qualify.
I'll add my 2 cents that the small farmers would have an advantage in the interim by being able to find a new market for their product. So that helps them. And whatever disadvantage it puts the average retail licensee at, it's not going to be forever. It's going to be for 5 months. I don't see that as particularly onerous on them. So I'm fine with shall.
But is it okay? I'm just confused. Is it shall? Because I mean, is shall saying that it's first come first serve?
No, shall says that there can be 5 of them. There can be 5, and if whoever comes applies for it and they qualify, they meet all the requirements, they shall be given a license. They can have 5. There can be 5 licenses, and there are only 5 people that qualify for the 5 licenses. So it isn't as if anybody's being cut out. There can be 5 licenses, and there are 5 dispensaries now. So each of them, if they qualify, could have one. That would mean 5 retail establishments in 250 towns.
And then Keisha, in October,
Yep.
when it completely opens up for any retail licenses.
Mm-hmm.
It's tiered because our experience in getting testimony from the other states was to not open all the licensing categories at once, because you got to first start with cultivators and testing, and then you kind of roll that out. And if you start trying to do everybody at once, you get overwhelmed. And so, or you have retailers that have no product, things like that. And so,
so it's saying they have to get their ducks in a row and come with their application.
Yeah.
And it's guaranteed if they do that and everything's in order.
yes.
And everything's in order.
And there's no one else that we're leaving out in the interim by doing that.
No, because there are only 5 of them.
and you can grant 5 licenses.
Okay, I guess I just got lost in what the controversy is, but
The controversy is that some people didn't want, they think that giving the dispensaries a leg up is going to disadvantage everybody else. And I think there was also some fear that they would put retail establishments in many different towns, which they can't do. They can only do the one retail establishment. So, okay, I'm going to, I see that both of you have your hands up here, but I need to get the committee to agree on something here, and then we'll, or not, if we can't agree today, we'll take this up again on Thursday, but anyway, or you can keep doing this
Anthony
if
and
you
I
want.
just, Anthony and I just need to weigh in, and we need to go soon.
Yeah,
So I'm happy to stay with the shall, and if they work something out and change it in the house, that's fine. But I think for the moment, I'm a shall.
I would go with shall, and I would also mention that pretty soon I'm gonna have to feed my turtle.
yes, I think that you are right. The turtle needs to be fed. So we will look at this language again, assuming that we will have some language.